Chapter 973. At that moment, a clam maiden leisurely walked into the palace and bowed at the man. Master, everything is normal at Sea God Reef. Qin Ling has been staying in the sunken ship the entire time and hasn't left. This is that dragon granny, right? Zhouwen thought. The man nodded slightly. Watch over her. I don't want any accidents to happen. Dragon Granny glanced at the Seven Seas Dragon King and said in a demonic tone, Master, that Zhouwen is Wang Mingyuan's disciple after all. If we kill him just like that, I'm afraid it will be detrimental to your plan if Wang Mingyuan comes looking for trouble. The man said coldly, So what if he's Wang Mingyuan? When I roamed the Federation, who knows where he was? Even if he's lucky enough to become the Lord of the Dragon Gods, it's just a moment of luck. When my plan succeeds, being the Lord of the Dragon Gods means nothing. Both the humans and dragons will acknowledge me as their lord. What should we do with Mia? If she hadn't leaked the background of the other dragon monarchs, Zhouwen wouldn't have been able to kill them so easily, Dragon Granny asked carefully. Qin Ling is still with her. Ignore her for now. However, to prevent any accidents, we need to let Qin Ling reach adulthood as soon as possible and extract her human dragon bloodline. As the man spoke, he took out an item and threw it to Dragon Granny. He sneered and said, Take this to the sunken ship and let Qin Ling eat it. In less than half a year, her human dragon bloodline will be useful. When the time comes, all humans will be transformed into draconians. It'll be useless even if the other guardians win. Earth will forever be mine. I'll do it now. Dragon Granny took the item and bowed before leaving the hall. Zhouwen was alarmed when he heard that. This person is even more ruthless than Teacher and Jing Daoxian. Teacher only brought a portion of people into the dimension, and Jing Daoxian only found talented people to experiment on. This fellow actually wants to turn all humans into human dragons. He's too crazy. From his tone, he seems to have been a member of the Federation's upper echelons a long time ago. Who is he? Zhouwen was somewhat anxious when he thought of how Dragon Granny had already gone to Sea God Reef. However, he could only protect himself now. He couldn't even rush out of the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach, much less inform Qin Ling go. Guard the seven dragons, see well. Don't let any outsiders come into contact with Qin Ling. The man waved his hand, gesturing for the Seven Seas Dragon King to leave. Inside Sea God Reef, Qin Ling was talking to Mia. Sister, how can you trust a human so easily? Qin Ling asked. Mia sighed and said, I was blinded by greed. I actually believed that he could defeat the Seven Seas Dragon King. Now, not only is the Seven Seas Dragon King not dead, but he has also lost his life. If I had known, I would have insisted that he take you away from the Seven Dragons Sea. However, Qin Ling shook her head and said, I won't leave with any human. I don't belong to humans. Mia reached out to rub Qin Ling's head and sighed. If it weren't for the Seven Seas Dragon King, you could stay here forever, but not now. I have to think of a way to get you to leave the Seven Dragons Sea. You have half a human bloodline, so you still have a chance of breaking through the dimensional zone's restrictions. So what if I go out? Won't I still be looked at like a monster? Qin Ling felt disheartened. Feng Xiuyan already knew about her matter, but he hadn't appeared again. Qin Ling had already given up. Little Feng might not have figured it out yet. Give him some time, Mia said helplessly. In fact, Mia didn't understand Qin Ling's feelings. As she was a pure dragon, she didn't think there was anything wrong with being a dragon. However, Qin Ling was half human. Furthermore, she had grown up in human society. The other half of the dragon bloodline not only gave her strength, but it also gave her immense pressure. As the two of them were talking, a shrimp soldier reported, Master, Dragon Granny is here. Why is she here? Mia thought for a moment and said to Qin Ling, Stay here and don't come out. I'll go see why Dragon Granny is here. With that said, Mia left the cabin and came to the deck. Indeed, she saw Dragon Granny floating in the seawater outside. Dragon Granny, why are you here instead of being on Infinite Island? Mia asked with a cold expression. Several dragon monarchs of the Seven Dragons Sea have been killed. The dragon monarchs got me to come and see if you were in trouble. If there is, I can help you. As Dragon Granny spoke, she passed through the water curtain and landed on the deck. Thank you for your kind intentions. There's no trouble here. You can return, Mia said expressionlessly. Why are you in such a hurry to chase me away? I heard that your human sister has returned. Why don't I see her? Dragon Granny said with a smile. She's not feeling well and is resting. Please return. Mia didn't have a good impression of Dragon Granny. I'm good at essence energy restoration. I could take a look at her. Take me to her, Dragon Granny said. Don't make me personally take action. Mia stared at Dragon Granny as her voice turned cold. You can give it a try. Dragon Granny remained smiling, not angry at all. Mia didn't stand on ceremony as she threw a punch at Dragon Granny. Mia had inherited the Golden Dragon King's bloodline and strength. The might of this punch was extremely powerful. Even Tyrant Behemoth was inferior. However, Dragon Granny wasn't in a hurry. She took out a small rattle drum from her clamshell and gently shook it twice. Suddenly, Mia lost all the strength in her fist. A golden incantation appeared on her neck like a collar. It strangled her neck as though it was about to snap her neck. Boom! Mia revealed her Golden Dragon King true form. The huge golden dragon body rolled on the deck, but the golden incantation on her neck kept glowing. No matter how Mia struggled, she couldn't escape. As the rattle drum in Dragon Granny's hand accelerated, the incantation on Mia's neck tightened. Mia was already slumped weakly on the deck, her neck about to snap. Sis, what's wrong? Qin Ling ran out and was alarmed when she saw Mia's state. She wanted to help Mia remove the incantation on her neck. However, just as her hand touched the incantation suddenly shrank, causing Mia immense pain. However, she couldn't make sound. She was about to die. Prime Minister Turtle rushed over with the shrimp and crab soldiers, but Dragon Granny only said indifferently, "If you want her dead, feel free to come." What do you want? Qin Ling stared at Dragon Granny and asked. Dragon Granny opened the box in her hand and took out the crystal bottle inside and handed it to Qin Ling. Drink this, and I'll let her go. What's this? Qin Ling asked as she looked at the transparent liquid in the crystal bottle. Poison. A life for a life. Do you dare drink it? Dragon Granny said with narrowed eyes. Chapter 974. Will you let my sister off if I drink it? Qin Ling said as she looked at the bottle in her hand. Qin Ling, throw it away, Mia said as she struggled. Dragon Granny shook the rattle drum again. Mia was immediately strangled to the point where she couldn't make a sound. All she could do was tremble in pain on the ground. Of course, I, Dragon Granny, have always been a man of my word. Today, your sister has offended me, so one of you has to die. Either you or your sister can die. Dragon Granny smiled at Qin Ling and said, Of course, you can also choose not to drink it. It's the same if your sister dies. After all, she doesn't have the same father as you, nor are you considered sisters, right? I'll drink it. Let my sister go, Qin Ling said through gritted teeth. It's easy for me to kill you. There's no need to lie to you. Drink it, and I'll immediately release your sister, Dragon Granny said slowly. Mia couldn't make a sound as she struggled to get up to snatch the bottle from Qin Ling's hand. However, Dragon Granny shook the rattle drum, and Mia immediately slumped to the deck, trembling in pain. Mia knew that someone must have done something to her. Otherwise, with Dragon Granny's strength, it was impossible for her to be her match, much less make her so miserable. However, Mia couldn't recall when someone had done something to her. Stop shaking it. I'll drink it, Qin Ling said as she opened the bottle and was about to drink the liquid inside. Don't drink it. With a clear voice, a saber beam slashed at Dragon Granny on the deck. Little Feng, Qin Ling was pleasantly surprised when she saw the person. Feng Qiuyan was expressionless as he slashed at Dragon Granny with the Life Soul saber in his hand. Dragon Granny's figure swayed as she dodged Feng Qiuyan's saber stance. She originally wanted to counterattack, but she realized that Feng Qiuyan's saber stance was like a surging river. She couldn't find any flaws. Your saber art isn't bad. Unfortunately, You're too weak. As Dragon Granny spoke, she used a clamshell to block Feng Qiuyan's saber. Then, she struck Feng Qiuyan's chest and sent him flying. Little Feng. Qinling immediately flew over to catch Feng Qiuyan, who had flown back. She saw his chest collapse and blood seep out from the corner of his mouth. Sisling, I'm sorry I'm late, Feng Qiuyan said as usual. You shouldn't have come. Qinling checked Feng Qiuyan's injuries with a complicated expression. How are you? Qinling looked at Mia and Feng Qiuyan. She held the bottle and was just as she was about to raise it. She grabbed it and threw it to the ground. Qinling looked at Mia and Feng Qiuyan. She held the bottle and was just about to raise it when Feng Qiuyan grabbed it and snatched it away, throwing it to the ground. However, the bottle was very sturdy. It didn't break, and the liquid inside didn't spill at all. However, the Ling had the bottle at it, but the bottle was at it. A strange aura arose from Dragon Granny's body as her eyes suffused a red glow as she stared at Feng Qiuyan. She wanted to kill Feng Qiuyan first before forcefully injecting the liquid into Qinling's body. Qinling wanted to stand in front of Feng Qiuyan, but she was held back by him. Feng Qiuyan slowly got up and stared at the Dragon Granny. He said, I'm sorry to have made you wait for so long. However, there are some things that I have to do before I can come. Otherwise, it would be useless even if I came. As he spoke, a companion beast appeared from Feng Qiuyan's body. It was a male companion beast with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a snake. He wore a robe that resembled a priest. Mythical companion beast. You went to the Wind God Cave? Qinling asked in surprise when she saw Feng Qiuyan's companion beast. Yes, there are some things that require sufficient strength to do. Therefore, I went to the Wind God Cave and contracted the companion beast inside before coming to pick you up, Feng Qiuyan said. Qinling was delighted. She naturally knew what the Wind God Cave was. It was a dimensional zone that only people with the Feng family's bloodline could enter. There was a special companion beast there. Although it wasn't a companion egg, as long as it had the Feng family's bloodline, it could be taken in as one's companion beast like incubating a companion egg. However, the companion beast needed too much essence energy. Many generations of the Feng family, including many powerful epic experts, wanted to subdue it, but they failed in the end. Although they didn't die, their cultivation levels were crippled. Feng Qiuyan had actually gone to the Wind God Cave for her. It made Qinling's previously disheartened heart feel like a withered tree that had been revived. The strange companion beast transformed into a gust of wind and attached itself to Feng Qiuyan's body as though it had vanished. However, Feng Qiuyan's aura rapidly rose. Dragon Granny looked at Feng Qiuyan in surprise. Although she couldn't recognize the origins of the companion beast, she knew that it was no trifling matter from Feng Qiuyan's aura. If you don't want her to die, it's best you stand there and don't do anything, Dragon Granny said as she raised the rattle drum in her hand. Clearly, she wanted to use Mia to threaten Feng Qiuyan. If I were you, I wouldn't move. That's because as long as you shake that rattle drum, I'll behead you, Feng Qiuyan said calmly. Interesting. A mere human actually dares to threaten me with a companion beast. I want to see how you will behead me. As Dragon Granny spoke, she was about to shake the rattle drum in her hand. However, just as she moved her hand, Feng Qiuyan's figure vanished like the wind. When he appeared again, he was already behind Dragon Granny. Crack! The rattle drum in Dragon Granny's hand broke, and half of it fell to the ground. Dragon Granny was alarmed. She didn't see how Feng Qiuyan had moved. She wanted to turn her head to take a look, but her head moved, but her body didn't. The head landed on the ground before her body collapsed. One of the 7 dragon monarchs, Dragon Granny, had died just like that. Feng Qiuyan also spat out a mouthful of blood. The mysterious companion beast automatically separated from his body and turned back into a tattoo. The incantation patterns on Mia's neck vanished as her body gradually recovered its strength. She looked at Dragon Granny's corpse on the ground in disbelief. What companion beast is that? It doesn't look like a dragon? Mia asked Feng Qiuyan. Feng Qiuyan shook his head and said, I don't know his name. I only know that his surname is Feng. He only follows people from the Feng family, but my strength is too weak. I can't even withstand the tremors produced when using his strength. Suddenly, the waves churned and the water churned. The Seven Seas Dragon King charged into the Sea God Reef dimensional zone. It sensed Dragon Granny's death. Chapter 975. No good. It's the Seven Seas Dragon King. I'll hold it back. You guys return to land first. Mia had only had a restriction placed on her previously, but she wasn't injured. Although Feng Shuyan had obtained the mysterious mythical companion beast, his body couldn't take it if it attached itself to him in its soul form, because the mythical companion beast was too powerful. His body had already been injured after using it for a short period of time. It was obvious how powerful the companion beast was. Mia rushed out of the cabin and immediately saw the Seven Seas Dragon King's true body. Due to Dragon Granny's death, he was already enraged. He couldn't care less about hiding. When he saw Mia come out, the seven strange, dragon-like tentacles swept over. Mia transformed into the Golden Dragon King's body and charged forward to fight the Seven Seas Dragon King. The strength of her body wasn't inferior to the Seven Seas Dragon King's. It was even stronger than the Seven Seas Dragon King's body. Beams of golden light shone resplendently as the seawater churned and huge waves appeared on the surface of the sea. Prime Minister Turtle also rushed forward with his spear and helped Mia attack the Seven Seas Dragon King. However, Prime Minister Turtle wasn't as fast as Mia. He was accidentally hit by the white liquid spewed out by the strange dragon's mouth. Immediately, he was stuck as though he had been drenched in superglue. At first, he could still move, but soon he couldn't even move. He was sent flying by the strange dragon-like tentacles and smashed into the sand at the bottom of the sea. Qin Ling supported the injured Feng Qiuyan as she swam towards the beach. Her body suffused a golden glow as delicate scales appeared on her skin. Her hair and pupils turned pale gold. Although she was still in human form, she didn't look like a human. However, she wasn't ugly. She just looked a little strange. After transforming, Qin Ling's speed in the water became extremely fast as she quickly swam towards the coast with Feng Shuyan. Mia constantly fought the Seven Seas Dragon King. Her terrifying Golden Dragon King body didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. She was truly powerful. However, she had yet to advance to the Terror grade. The Seven Seas Dragon King once again used the posture of a Buddha, chanting scriptures, and entered his terror form. Mia immediately felt herself sink into a thick fog. She heard the chanting coming from all directions, unable to tell where the Seven Seas Dragon King was in the fog. Suddenly, a strange dragon-like tentacle emerged from the fog and spat out white liquid at Mia. Mia reacted extremely quickly as she twisted her dragon body to dodge. However, another tentacle constantly drilled out of the fog. Before Mia could react, white liquid sprayed over her body. Soon, Mia felt the spot where the white liquid had been sprayed stiffen. The dragon claws were stuck to her body, making it abnormally difficult for her to swing them. More and more white liquid sprayed onto the Golden Dragon King body. Mia was like a bound beast. No matter how strong she was, it was useless as the Seven Seas Dragon King's tentacles bit down on her golden dragon body. The seven strange dragons bit at Mia's body, but she was unable to resist. Soon, she was covered in wounds. The Seven Seas Dragon King clearly hated Mia to the core and didn't devour her directly. Leave first. I want to return to save my sister. When Qin Ling saw the Golden Dragon King that Mia had transformed into being ravaged by the Seven Seas Dragon King, she gritted her teeth and rushed back. Feng Shuyan grabbed her and forcefully pulled her ashore. It's useless for you to return. Let's go ashore first. I know it's useless, but if I don't return, I won't be able to feel at ease for the rest of my life. Qin Ling wanted to shake off Feng Shuyan. I'm sorry, Sis Ling. Feng Shuyan carried Qin Ling and ignored her resistance as he rushed to the shore. At that moment, the coast was filled with surging seawater. The beach could no longer be seen. Even the trees outside were covered in seawater. Wait at a place without water. You're not allowed to come down. Feng Shuyan put Qin Ling down before turning around and pouncing into the sea. Qin Ling stared blankly at Feng Shuyan's figure as he rushed into the sea. She suddenly realized that this wasn't the Feng Shuyan she knew in the past. The little tail that followed behind her all day, the friendly big boy who called her Sister Ling. These clear impressions suddenly became blurry. What replaced them was the feeling of a man, not a boy. He has really grown up. Qin Ling had a complicated expression. After some thought, she jumped onto a lighthouse beside her and waited for Feng Shuyan in the sea. After Feng Shuyan entered the sea, he quickly rushed back to where the Seven Seas Dragon King and Mia were fighting. The Golden Dragon King that Mia had transformed into was already severely injured. Feng Shuyan knew that he only had one chance. His body was already injured, so it was impossible for him to withstand the mysterious companion beast's possession for long. He had to resolve the problem in one strike. The Seven Seas Dragon King seemed to want to tear Mia apart. It believed that Mia had killed Dragon Granny, so the hatred in its heart was unbearable. This is a good opportunity. Feng Shuyan summoned the mysterious companion beast and allowed it to attach itself to him as a soul. After succeeding, Feng Shuyan didn't hesitate to draw his saber and slash. It was the power of the wind. In an instant, it sliced through the seawater and slashed at the Seven Seas Dragon King's body. However, when the blade struck the Seven Seas Dragon King's body, it was like a blunt knife cutting through cow tendons. The saber, with the power of a mythical companion beast, only managed to slice in less than 10 centimeters. A wound that was 10 centimeters deep was enough to be fatal to a human. However, to the massive Seven Seas Dragon King, it was nothing. Bam! With a flick of the strange dragon-like tentacle, Feng Shuyan's body was sent flying. He shot out of the sea like a cannonball with splashes. As though he had had enough of the game of cat and mouse, the Seven Seas Dragon King opened its true mouth to keep Mia alive. Only then could he resolve the hatred in his heart. Mia was stuck to the white liquid and had no ability to resist. Knowing that it was impossible for her to survive, she transformed into a human-like form and was swallowed by the Seven Seas Dragon King to prevent herself from being bitten and suffering so much pain. Foam! When Qin Ling saw Feng Shuyan being thrown out of the water, her expression changed drastically. She hurriedly rushed over and hugged him. Seeing that although Feng Shuyan was seriously injured, he wasn't dead, Qin Ling felt a little more at ease. She glanced at the sea and gritted her teeth before rushing out of Sea God Reef with Feng Shuyan in her arms. Although she really wanted to rush back and fight with Mia, she definitely couldn't allow Feng Shuyan to die in front of her. Just as they rushed back to the shore, they saw a man in black armor standing on the shore like a noble, blocking their path. Qin Ling, you don't belong to that world yet. Return with me. In the future, you will become the new human ancestor, the black-armored man said slowly. Chapter 976. Zhou kept trying to leave the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach, but it was filled with white liquid. Even teleportation couldn't be used in the white liquid, so it wasn't easy to leave. With the Chaos Egg's protection, Zhou life wasn't in danger. He could slowly try various means, hoping to restrain the Seven Seas Dragon King. First was the power of fire. This power was clearly useless against the white liquid, or perhaps Zhou's firepower level wasn't high, so it wasn't effective. Companion beasts with powerful bodies were useless. They would be stuck to the white liquid the moment they touched it, preventing them from unleashing their combat strength. It was the same for weapon-type companion beasts. No matter how sharp a companion beast was, it would be stuck to the white liquid. It was useless. Zhou basically tried all the various companion beasts and abilities he had, but it was useless. Could it be that this white liquid is really that invincible? Is there no power that can restrain it? Zhou didn't believe such a thing. What other powers are there that I haven't used? After some thought, Zhou suddenly thought of something. It was the terror item he had previously put away. Those terror items were extremely cold. If he could freeze the liquid into a solid, it might lose its stickiness. Joan tried taking out the bone and placing it into the white liquid. It was unknown if only the power of the Terrorgrade could restrain the Terrorgrade, or if it was because the power of frost was the nemesis of the white liquid. After the extremely cold bone was inserted into the white liquid, the nearby white liquid quickly froze. It's actually possible. Joan reached out to touch it and realized that the solidified white liquid was indeed no longer sticky. Furthermore, it no longer had any corrosive effects. So the Seven Seas Dragon King can also be restrained by the Ice Dragon's power. In that case, the person who killed the Ice Dragon back then might not be the Seven Seas Dragon King. It might very well be the human with a guardian, Joan guessed. Otherwise, it was difficult to explain why the Seven Seas Dragon King's power could still kill the Ice Dragon despite being restrained by the Ice Dragon's bone. Was Mia's father also killed by that man? Joan thought of Mia's father again. Her father had actually left behind a companion egg, so the possibility of him being killed by a human was very high. With a way to restrain the white liquid, Joan solidified the surrounding white liquid, but he quickly discovered another problem. The solidified white liquid was very tough and almost indestructible. He spent a lot of effort to break a small piece of the white solid. That's a little troublesome. If it's not frozen, it'll be too sticky. If it's frozen, it'll be too hard. Joan attempted to use the Ice Dragon Bone to strike it. It was much easier than using a mythical weapon, but it wasn't fast. Joan had no other choice but to shatter the white liquid as he froze it. Thankfully, he had Tyrant Behemoth's help. Otherwise, Joan's progress would have been even more tragic. The main reason was that Joan's body wasn't resistant to the cold. He couldn't come into contact with the Ice Dragon Bone for long periods of time. Even Tyrant Behemoth had to use absolute strength to hold the Ice Dragon Tooth for a long period of time without being injured. As he dug, he suddenly sensed the Seven Seas Dragon King's rage. Then, he saw it fighting Mia and Feng Shuyan. Although Joan wanted to help, he really couldn't leave for the time being. Mia, who was covered in wounds, was swallowed and fell into the white liquid. She originally believed that she was doomed. Not only was the white liquid extremely sticky, but also had a terrifying corrosive ability. Even with her golden dragon body, it was difficult for her to withstand it for long, much less when she was heavily injured. Just as Mia had given up hope of survival, she suddenly felt something grab her hand and pull her forcefully. At the same time, she felt a terrifying chill coming from her body. The white liquid that was originally stuck to her body slowly became less sticky due to the cold. Soon, Mia was pulled over by the hand. When Mia came out of the white liquid, she almost couldn't believe her eyes. "Joan, you're actually still alive?" Mia looked at Joan in surprise and delight, almost believing that she was dreaming. After being devoured by the Seven Seas Dragon King for so long, Joan was still alive. Furthermore, he didn't seem to be injured. "Is it strange that I'm alive?" Joan said with a smile. "No, I just didn't expect you to survive in the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach." Mia looked around and realized that the white liquid had turned solid. It was no longer harmful. "It's all thanks to these things that I can survive in its stomach," Joan said as he pointed at the Ice Dragon Tooth in Tyrant Behemoth's hand. "This thing can actually restrain the Seven Seas Dragon King's sticky liquid?" Then how did the Seven Seas Dragon King kill the Ice Dragon King? Mia found it unbelievable when she saw this. "I suspect that the Ice Dragon King wasn't killed by the Seven Seas Dragon King, but by a human," Joan said. "A human? That's even more impossible. How can a human kill the Ice Dragon King? It's a Terrorgrade existence." Mia was even more incredulous. Ordinary humans can't do it, but humans with guardians might not. Did the Seven Dragons Sea have guardian cocoons in the past? Joan asked after some thought. "I don't think so. I've never heard of a guardian cocoon here. Typical guardian cocoons are purely in a dimensional zone of a certain race. The dimensional creatures in the Seven Dragons Sea are too mixed, so it's not suitable to release guardians," Mia said after some thought. "That makes sense." Joan told Mia what he had heard. Mia's face was filled with disbelief when she heard that. You mean that the Seven Seas Dragon King is only a puppet? The person who really controls the seven dragons sea is a human? From the looks of it, that's indeed the case. Zhou nodded. If he wants to extract Qin Ling's bloodline, wouldn't Qin Ling be in danger? No, I have to think of a way to save her. Mia looked at the white liquid around her, but she didn't know how to do it. Don't worry. The other party needs to wait for the human dragon bloodline in Qin Ling's body to completely take form before attacking her. It will take at least half a month. We still have time. As Zhou spoke to Mia, he listened to the commotion outside. After the Seven Seas Dragon King devoured Mia, he left Sea God Reef and swam towards the underwater abyss. Zhou's heart stirred as he made Tyrant Behemoth stop. Since he was safe now, he might as well follow the Seven Seas Dragon King into the Abyssal Palace. Perhaps he could find out more secrets. Chapter 977. What's wrong? Mia asked Zhou in puzzlement when she saw Tyrant Behemoth put down the ice dragon tooth and stop digging. The Seven Seas Dragon King has gone to meet that person. Even if we can leave now, we will die. Let's wait. Zhou didn't have a good solution. Even if he didn't want to eavesdrop, now wasn't the time to go out. Sitting down on the crystal, Zhou took out his phone to continue gaming and grinding dungeons. He didn't know how long he would stay here, so he had nothing to do. Mia knew that Zhou was right. Even if they left, they couldn't even defeat the Seven Seas Dragon King, much less an even more terrifying human. Qin Ling has been captured by them, right? Although Mia had already guessed the answer, she still hoped that Zhou could give her a different answer. He must have been captured. Although Zhou didn't see the man capture Feng Qiuyin and Qin Ling, he knew that it was impossible for the man to let Qin Ling leave. Mia was vexed, but there was nothing she could do. Even if she wanted to go out and risk her life, she couldn't do it. When can we leave? Mia asked, but she was suddenly stunned. She realized that she seemed to be too reliant on the human in front of her. In the past, she wouldn't even look at humans, much less ask such a stupid question. Zhou looked up at Mia and said, "Don't worry, I'll save them." Although it was a very simple sentence, Mia felt much better after hearing it. It was as though Zhou could really do it. The Seven Seas Dragon King returned to the underwater abyss, but to Zhou's dismay, it didn't head for the underwater palace where the human was. Instead, it entered a cave to rest. Zhou could only wait patiently. With a fighter like the Seven Seas Dragon King available, it was impossible for the human to let the Seven Seas Dragon King sleep in the cave. Zhou knew that it was useless to be anxious. He grinded dungeons as usual and also farmed some mortal companion eggs to feed to the evil Spirit King, hoping that it could evolve as soon as possible. He came to the ancient Sword Tomb dungeon again. Zhou had been grinding here recently, hoping to gain some inspiration. Perhaps there was a chance to evolve Sword Pill. Furthermore, when grinding the ancient Sword Tomb dungeon recently, Zhou had been the one to draw the sword and kill it. He didn't get Tyrant Behemoth to take action. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to gain any insights. One ancient sword after another was pulled out and killed by the blood-colored avatar. Quite a number of crystals dropped, but they didn't trigger anything. Could it be that the advancement of the sword pill has nothing to do with the sword? Zhou thought to himself, but there was nothing he could do. This was the only solution he could think of. Zhou came in front of Sword Grave again and pulled out a short sword. The dagger was crimson in color and looked like it was forged from copper. It was exquisite and elegant. The hilt was in the shape of a phoenix head, and the guard was a pair of wings. Furthermore, the dagger even had a scabbard. The moment the short sword was pulled out, terrifying flames erupted from the scabbard. It was so hot that Zhou immediately let go and hurriedly summoned the Galaxy Shell Dragon armor to wear. The short sword attacked Zhou again with flames that filled the sky. It was clearly a mythical fire elemental ancient sword, and the power of the flames was rather powerful. However, the defense of the Shell Dragon armor surprised Zhou. Without activating absolute defense, it was able to block the ancient sword's attack. However, The flaming sword aura on the ancient sword burned the armor. When Zhou activated absolute defense, he realized that he couldn't even feel the heat from the flaming sword aura. Zhou stood there and allowed the ancient sword to constantly slash at him. At most, it would knock him back a few steps, unable to injure him at all. What a powerful defense! Zhou was overjoyed. Such armor's defense was definitely a life-preservation weapon. It was much stronger than the dragon scale armor. The strength of absolute defense was likely comparable to Tyrant Behemoth's absolute strength. However, one was offensive while the other was defensive. Thankfully, I killed the Galaxy Shell Dragon with a sneak attack. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been easy to kill it in a head-on battle. Zhou was secretly delighted. The duration of absolute defense was shorter than absolute strength, but it was already very strong. Even a top mythical power would find it difficult to injure Zhou during the duration of absolute defense. Absolute strength, absolute defense. Could there be absolute speed or something? If I can gather an absolute set, that would be really impressive, Zhou thought greedily. After testing the strength of the Shell Dragon armor, Zhou wasn't in the mood to waste time with the ancient sword. He summoned the light concealment sword to fight. Zhou's sword techniques were already pretty good, but he couldn't gain an advantage over the short sword. As he fought, Zhou suddenly realized that there was no need for him to work so hard. He didn't need to do anything himself. He was a man with sword pill. Sword pill was similar to a flying sword. It could be used in midair, so there was no need for him to use the sword to slash at others. I wonder if the strength of sword pill can fight a mythical weapon. Zhou summoned sword pill and planned on giving it a try. With a thought, a resplendent, diamond-like sword pill appeared in front of Zhou. Then, with Zhou's thought, it stabbed at the short sword. Clang! Clang! Sword pill and the short sword constantly clashed in midair as Zhou became a spectator. So it's so fun not having to use a sword to slash at others. Could it be that so many people like flying swords? It's indeed a necessary technique for lazy people. Zhou was somewhat delighted. It wasn't because he had found a way to slack off, but because of the strength of sword pill. It could actually clash head-on with a mythical sword without being damaged. It's really good stuff. Zhou used the 3,000 sword intense. Sword pill had the concept of 3,000 sword intense. Now that Zhou used the 13 sword techniques, the might and concept were much stronger than when he used a sword to slash at others. Furthermore, sword pill didn't have any restrictions. The moves he could use were far more than when Zhou used them himself. They were also more carefree. If I can really raise sword pill to the mythical stage in the future, will I be like the ancient legendary sword immortals, able to behead someone from thousands of kilometers away? The more Zhou used sword pill, the more comfortable he felt with it. He decided to use the short sword as a sparring partner and used all 3,000 sword intense. Zhou didn't notice that when he used sword pill to fight the short sword, some ancient swords in the ancient sword tomb would tremble slightly every time he switched to a different sword intent. It was as though they were responding to the sword intent on sword pill. Chapter 978. The characteristics of sword pill were very strange. Typical weapons, or mobile life souls, needed to be in contact with each other before they could inject essence energy into the weapon. Even if one could transmit essence energy across space, there would be a transmission path that resembled a link. However, sword pill was completely different. There seemed to be some kind of spatial teleportation ability between it and Zhou. Even if they were far apart, Zhou's essence energy could be instantly transmitted into sword pill's body without any expenditure. There are no traces of transmission. Be it control or essence energy transmission, there was no delay. This was very rare. At the very least, Zhou had never seen such an ability on other weapons. Using the characteristics of sword pill, Zhou could attack from afar without any qualms. It was almost the same as him attacking with a sword in hand. Zhou controlled sword pill to constantly fight the ancient sword, and his control over sword pill became stronger. Unfortunately, Sword Pill was only an epic life soul after all. It was still difficult to defeat a mythical ancient sword. During the battle, Zhou discovered some strange phenomena. When Zhou controlled Sword Pill to use a specific sword intent, some swords in the ancient sword tomb would react to the sword intent. Different ancient swords would react to different sword intents. If it reacts to the sword intent, it means that the ancient sword has a similar concept, which is why it resonates. Does that mean that I can use the sword intent on the sword pill to determine which type of ancient sword they belong to? However, it doesn't seem useful to determine the type. It would be great if I could directly determine which sword is at the mythical stage. As Zhou fought, he observed the ancient swords that had a reaction. After a while, Zhou suddenly realized that he might really be able to determine the level of an ancient sword through the sword intent resonance. As low-level ancient swords had very weak sword intents, they didn't even have any sword intents. Therefore, it was relatively difficult to trigger their resonance. As for a stronger ancient sword, it was easier to trigger a resonance due to its stronger sword intent. Such ancient swords were mainly at the epic stage. 4 higher levels, like those mythical ancient swords, due to their extremely strong sword intents, Zhou's sword intent had to be of a sufficiently high level to trigger their resonance. Therefore, it was relatively difficult. Therefore, Zhou came to a conclusion. Ancient swords that easily resonated were typically at the epic stage. A small number were at the legendary stage. As for the ancient swords that didn't resonate easily, they were either the strongest mythical ones, the weakest legendary ones, or even mortal ones. In any case, they were either the best or the worst. Although he couldn't accurately distinguish them, being able to eliminate a large number of options was a huge improvement for Zhou. In the constant battle with the ancient sword, Zhou had a whim. Since Sword Pill has already fused with 3,000 sword intents and can resonate with different types of ancient swords, it means that it has all sorts of different characteristics. Therefore, it's clearly wrong for me to want to turn it into a certain type of sword. But there's no sword in the world that can accommodate all the characteristics. Then, can I make Sword Pill become a sword suitable for different sword intents when using different sword intents? Zhou didn't know if Sword Pill had such a transformation ability, but he decided to give it a try. Zhou didn't know what kind of sword should be matched with what kind of sword intent, but with the ancient sword tomb, this wasn't a problem. All he needed to do was use a sword intent and pull out the ancient sword that resonated with the sword intent. Then, he could understand all the characteristics of the ancient sword through combat. However, before that, Zhou had to defeat the ancient sword with fire elemental powers in front of him. The ancient sword was very difficult to deal with. It was clearly difficult for Zhou to defeat it with his sword skills and strength. Zhou didn't wish to waste any more time, so he summoned Tyrant Behemoth. With Tyrant Behemoth's help, he quickly snapped the short sword. Killed mythical creature, bronze sparrow sword. Discovered companion egg. Zhou couldn't help but be delighted. He didn't have many fire elemental companion eggs, and weapons were even rarer. This mythical ancient sword was rather good and could be used. After hatching the bronze sparrow sword, with a thought, a red copper short sword with a scabbard appeared in Zhou's hand. The bronze sparrow sword had similar stats as the light concealment sword, but its life providence and life soul had fire elemental properties. Therefore, its attacks had fire elemental properties. This was something the light concealment sword didn't have. The bronze sparrow sword's wheel of destiny was unexpected. It wasn't an offensive wheel of destiny, but the ability to be reborn from flames. Even if the bronze sparrow sword was destroyed, as long as its scabbard was still there, it could use the flames in the scabbard to repair itself. So the bronze sparrow sword has such an ability. Thankfully, Tyrant Behemoth destroyed the sword and scabbard together. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been easy to kill it. Zhou still liked the bronze sparrow sword. However, after using it for a while, he realized that the sword was useless to him. Such a strong fire elemental attribute wasn't suitable for sneak attacks. It could be used as a normal sword. To be honest, Zhou wasn't good at fire elemental sword techniques. He might as well use Sword Pill. However, The advantages of the bronze sparrow sword were very obvious. It was very effective in restraining cold elemental attacks. Furthermore, its characteristic of being reborn from flames would be very useful at certain times. Zhou had no choice but to put away the bronze sparrow sword. He would take it out when he needed it in the future, or if there was a suitable opportunity in the future, it wouldn't be a bad idea to use it for fusion. After settling the bronze sparrow sword, Zhou began his plan of matching sword intent with the sword. He first used sword pill to resonate with the ancient sword before pulling out the resonating ancient sword. Then, he used battle intent to fully understand the sword's characteristics. Although sword pill didn't change in the beginning, Zhou realized that the matching sword intent had become stronger during the battle. It was really boring in the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach. Apart from grinding dungeons, Zhou had nothing else to do. Thankfully, he had brought a lot of food in the chaos space, so he didn't have to be afraid of hunger. Zhou took out quite a lot of food and drinks and gave a portion of them to Mia. In order to rest better, Zhou even took out a soft mattress and other things. He even gave Mia a player that stored quite a number of movies and music so that she could pass the time. Mia saw that Zhou was like a magical pocket that constantly took out all sorts of strange and novel things, making Mia increasingly feel that Zhou was different. For the next few days, the Seven Seas Dragon King slept in the cave and didn't see the human man again. It was useless for Zhou to worry. All he could do was get Tyrant Behemoth to open up the passageway as he constantly grinded dungeons to practice his swordplay, hoping to raise sword pill to a perfect body. Chapter 979. Constant practice every day brought about very good results. Although sword pill didn't advance, Zhou sword techniques really improved by leaps and bounds. Although it wasn't as ferocious as his movement techniques, he could already be considered to have gained some basic mastery of the sword Dao. It wasn't like the past where he only used a sword as a saber to slash at passersby. After practicing more, he found it fun. Although they were all swords, the usage and concept of different sword were different. Some very subtle things couldn't be understood just by looking at them. He had to experience them personally. As he had truly put in hard work, be it his sword intent or the 13 sword techniques, they were improving by leaps and bounds. Zhou felt that the 13 sword techniques were very likely the second divine skill he had mastered. 7 days had passed, but the Seven Seas Dragon King remained motionless. It slept in a cave, which was a little different from what Zhou had imagined. Although Tyrant Behemoth had already pierced through the white liquid and discovered that they were in something similar to his stomach, it was useless if they couldn't save Qin Ling and company, even if they could escape. Therefore, Zhou kept comforting Mia and getting her to continue waiting patiently. However, Zhou felt that it wasn't possible to just wait. Since the white liquid had been pierced through, Zhou decided to release Primordial Spore to see if it could parasitize the Seven Seas Dragon King from the inside. In theory, it seemed impossible for a mythical Primordial Spore to parasitize a Terror-grade Seven Seas Dragon King. However, Zhou felt that it wasn't completely impossible for Primordial Spore. After all, it was currently in the Seven Seas Dragon King's body. This was a huge advantage. Furthermore, the Seven Seas Dragon King was in a deep slumber. All aspects of his body were at their lowest state, so perhaps Primordial Spore had a chance. The tiny Primordial Spore flew out of the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach and quickly landed on the inner wall of a particular organ like a speck of dust. The Seven Seas Dragon King's organs were still heaving evenly without any abnormalities. Only then did Zhou heave a sigh of relief. Although he didn't know if the parasitism would succeed, from the looks of it, Primordial Spore hadn't been discovered. Zhou continued waiting. If Primordial Spore could successfully parasitize him, it would undoubtedly be great news for him. What followed was another long wait. Zhou spent every day grinding dungeons to train. His sword intent constantly became stronger, and his sword techniques seemed to be aided by God. In Zhou's mind, he remembered the characteristics and usage of different swords. Furthermore, he vaguely sensed that sword pill was showing signs of advancing. 3,000 sword intents needed to be matched with 3,000 swords. Most of the sword intents could be found in the ancient sword tomb. However, there were quite a few sword intents that did not resonate in the ancient sword tomb. Zhou didn't know if it was because his sword intent wasn't strong enough to trigger those high-level swords, or if there were no ancient swords with similar sword intent in the ancient sword tomb. Zhou thought for a moment and felt that the former was more likely. Therefore, he planned on raising his sword intent level. Although the sword intent originated from the sword art, it could only be comprehended and not practiced. If one could comprehend it, perhaps it would only take a moment to improve. However, if one did not comprehend it in their heart, even if they practiced for 10 years, they might not be able to improve at all. It's definitely impossible to train hard, but if I don't train, I won't be able to understand the true intent in the sword. Naturally, I won't be able to comprehend the sword intent. What should I do? Zhou thought for a moment and thought of a solution that wasn't really a solution. He first used the 3,000 sword intents to resonate with the ancient swords before pulling out the ancient swords that hadn't resonated. Although he might encounter low-level swords, he might also encounter mythical swords. If that happened, he would narrow the range of finding mythical swords. In the process of fighting high-level swords, he could comprehend his own sword intent. He drew his sword, fought, drew his sword, and fought again. Zhou kept repeating this process. What's that thing you play all day? Mia had been observing Zhou for many days. Although she wasn't interested in human games, this place was just too boring, so she couldn't help but ask when she saw that Zhou was gaming on his phone. Well, it's a phone game. I can kill monsters to obtain experience and equipment, Zhou explained. Upon hearing Zhou's words, Mia's expression turned odd. She didn't think of herself as a monster in the past, nor could she understand why Qinling was so vexed because she had the golden dragon bloodline. However, after hearing Zhou's unintentional words today, Mia suddenly understood why Qinling cared about the dragon bloodline. This was because she felt somewhat uncomfortable. Do you want to play? Zhou asked Mia. No need. Mia shook her head and sat back on her cushion to watch a television series. However, she couldn't immerse herself in it. She was somewhat dazed. Zhou didn't know what Mia was thinking. He was still constantly practicing his swordplay in-game. This was already the 11th day since Zhou and company entered the Seven Seas Dragon King. The Seven Seas Dragon King was still asleep, but Zhou received a signal that delighted him. Primordial Spore had successfully parasitized it. Although it was only a preliminary parasitization, and it would still take some time to truly control the Seven Seas Dragon King, this was already very good news for Zhou. I hope there's still time. The last time Zhou eavesdropped on the conversation between Dragon Granny and the man, he knew that if Qinling drank that thing, she would reach a mature state in half a month. When the time came, the man would extract Qinling's bloodline and create something that could turn humans into dragons. Zhou had to save Qinling before that happened. He didn't know if becoming a human dragon was good or bad, but humans had the right to choose. Zhou felt that such a forced mutation was a little overboard. At the very least, he didn't want to become a dragon man. Would it be better to become a catman? Zhou thought to himself that if he had to choose to transform, he would rather become a cat. At least it wouldn't be that ugly. Do you know sword arts? Zhou suddenly asked Mia one day. No. Mia shook her head and asked curiously, why are you suddenly asking this? If you know sword arts, I want to see your sword intent. After practicing for so many days, Zhou felt that his sword art had reached a bottleneck. If he could improve further, his sword art should be able to break through to the mythical stage. However, this bottleneck clearly wasn't that easy to break through. Furthermore, time was indeed too short. It hadn't been many days since he began practicing seriously. The concepts in the world are interconnected. Although I don't know sword arts, I can show you my concept if you want to see it, Mia said. Chapter 980. If it's possible, please let me take a look. Zhou felt that he really needed to change his train of thought. Otherwise, he would only walk into a dead end if he continued. Mia thought for a moment and said, I'm a golden dragon. All my powers are obtained from the inheritance. I only know one concept, Golden Dragon King battle intent. Battle intent? How is it different from ordinary concepts? Zhou asked. I can't tell. Feel it yourself, Mia said as she pressed a hand on Zhou's forehead. Zhou didn't dodge and allowed Mia's palm to press on his forehead. As he didn't dare cause too much of a stir in the Seven Seas Dragon King's body, Mia directly imprinted her Golden Dragon King battle intent into Zhou's mind, allowing him to directly sense her battle intent. At that instant, Zhou seemed to see an extremely terrifying Golden Dragon King appear in the world. It was ferocious and domineering, as though it was the overlord of the entire world. The terrifying battle intent made everything tremble. That was the primordial era. Lightning, earthly fire, great desolate water, and all kinds of disasters frequently descended. All kinds of creatures died in those disasters. Only those creatures with incomparably strong vitality that could resist the disasters could survive in that primordial era. The Golden Dragon King grew up in such an environment. At the same time, due to the death of all things, food became extremely scarce. All sorts of terrifying creatures could only fight each other and eat each other's flesh and blood. Battle. A crazy battle. Only by fighting could one survive. The Golden Dragon King might not be the strongest ferocious beast, nor was it the strongest with the strongest defense, much less the fastest. However, in the constant battles, the Golden Dragon King rapidly grew. It constantly transformed and evolved in battle, finally standing at the top of the food chain. The unyielding, fearless, brave, crazy, and intelligent will left even Zhou, who was a spectator, deeply shocked. Zhou knew that this was the Golden Dragon's heritage memories. The Golden Dragon King in the battle intent was actually the first Golden Dragon King. It probably no longer existed in the world. However, its fearless will to fight had been left behind forever. There's no such thing as good fortune after surviving a calamity in this world. It's basically obtaining enough insights and growth in a calamity that allows one to become better. Zhou came to a realization as he seemed to understand why his sword art had been unable to make a breakthrough. It wasn't because his training wasn't good enough, nor was it because his comprehension wasn't good enough, nor was it because he wasn't diligent enough. It was because no matter how much Zhou trained, he was ultimately learning from others in the 3,000 sword intents. He didn't comprehend anything that belonged to him in battle. This was also related to Zhou's views. He had no intention of practicing sword arts. He only learned sword arts to advance sword pill, so he naturally learned it without any intention of improving it further. Only now did Zhou realize that he had underestimated sword techniques. Everything in the world had its own logic. If he didn't put in the effort, no matter how smart he was, it would be difficult for him to reach the paramount realm. Only then did Zhou realize that he hadn't lost his sword techniques, but to himself. Indeed, I need to put my heart into everything I do. Zhou couldn't help but work hard. I hope my battle intent can help you, Mia said as she retracted her hand when she saw that Zhou had escaped the influence of her battle intent. Thank you so much. You're so useful. You've helped me greatly. Zhou thanked her sincerely. If Mia hadn't shown him the Golden Dragon King's battle intent, he wouldn't have thought of his own problems. It was very easy for humans to discover other people's problems, but it was the hardest to discover one's own problems. After figuring all of this out, Zhou's mind cleared up. When he thought about the 3,000 sword intents again, he immediately felt different. It was as though he was looking at the 3,000 sword intents from another angle. He discovered many things he hadn't noticed before. Mia looked at Zhou and suddenly realized that his aura seemed to have changed. It was ethereal and illusory, as though it was unreal. Although Zhou was standing in front of her, she felt that he was like a virtual image. He didn't have a physical existence. Furthermore, Zhou's presence continued to decrease. If she closed her eyes, she wouldn't even be able to sense Zhou when standing in front of her. What did you do? Mia looked at Zhou in a daze, not daring to move her eyes away from his figure. It was as though Zhou would vanish the moment she saw him. Nothing. I just gained some insights after seeing your Golden Dragon King's battle intent, Zhou said. Mia's expression turned even odder. She really didn't understand what Zhou performance had to do with the Golden Dragon King's battle intent. If Zhou's battle intent was surging like the reincarnation of a Tyrannosaurus, Mia believed that it was something he had comprehended from the Golden Dragon King's battle intent. But now, Zhou's presence was getting weaker and weaker. This completely contradicted the Golden Dragon King's battle intent. Mia couldn't understand how Zhou had connected the two and comprehended such a thing. Are humans also strange? Mia was puzzled. Zhou didn't explain further because some things couldn't be explained with words. After sitting down, he took out his phone and entered the game again. When he arrived at the ancient sword tomb again, Zhou wasn't in a hurry to use his sword. He walked to a sword tomb in front of him and reached out to pull out the sword in the tomb. After the ancient sword was pulled out, it immediately struggled out of Zhou's palm and flew into the air, preparing to attack. However, the ancient sword circled a few times in the air as though it couldn't see Zhou. It didn't attack him. Zhou ignored it and walked to another sword tomb. He pulled out the ancient sword on it. The outcome was the same. The ancient sword streaked across the sky as though it couldn't see Zhou. As Zhou walked, he pulled out his swords. Hundreds of ancient swords of different levels and attributes were pulled out by him, but none of them attacked Zhou. It was as though the person who pulled them out wasn't Zhou. At that moment, Zhou finally moved. With a tap of his finger, a resplendent sword pill tore through the air and streaked across the sky. More than 100 ancient swords were instantly sliced apart by Sword Pill. None of the swords could withstand a single strike from Sword Pill. The remnant sword fragments fell to the ground, leaving only Sword Pill floating in front of Zhou. Above Zhou and Sword Pill, incomparably terrifying sword intent rose. Hum! In the sword tomb, 10,000 swords hummed. Chapter 981. A swordsman is a murderous weapon. If the sword doesn't move, it will be like a Buddha or an immortal. If the sword moves, it will slay Buddha and exterminate immortals. If I don't have such intentions, why would I need to use the sword? If I use my sword, I will be the enemy of the entire world. Zhou stared at the sword pill in front of him and muttered to himself. The sword beam on the sword pill bloomed, and the many ancient swords in the ancient sword tomb buzzed even more intensely. Ancient swords tore out of the ground. Without anyone pulling them out, they flew out by themselves. Countless ancient swords tore out of the grave and attacked Zhou and Sword Pill like a rain of swords. The formation was truly terrifying, and even the world changed color. However, Zhou didn't show any fear. The baneful aura on the sword pill surged into the sky as it circled around him. Any ancient sword that approached Zhou was instantly sliced apart by the sword pill. The ancient sword attacked like rain and fell like rain. 3 feet away from Zhou, were stabbed with broken hilts, but there wasn't a single sword within 3 feet. Only the sword pill swept through the air like a god, shocking all the swords. A dragon-like sword hum tore through the air. It was a white ancient sword with the aura of a flood dragon on it. It was so brilliant that it couldn't be looked at directly. It transformed into a flood dragon-like sword beam that shot towards Zhou. That sword was clearly a mythical weapon, the Emperor of Swords. However, Zhou didn't seem to take it to heart. He extended his hand and beckoned at the sword pill, saying, "Sword, come." With that said, the sword pill transformed into a stream of light that shot towards Zhou's palm. When it landed in his palm, the sword pill had already transformed into a real sword. The sword was 4 feet long, and the sword spine was straight and firm. It was like an indomitable gentleman, and there were blood patterns faintly appearing on the sword. The flood dragon's sword slashed down from the sky, but Zhou didn't retreat at all. He slashed with his sword in defiance of the heavens. Clang! The flood dragon-like sword beam was slashed apart by the sword in Zhou's hand. It collided with the flood dragon sword's blade and sent it flying. Buzz! Another ancient sword tore out of the ground with a terrifying sword beam. The sword was wide and extremely heavy. When it slashed down, it felt like a mountain was pressing down on him. Its momentum seemed unstoppable. However, Zhou wasn't afraid as he brandished his sword to meet it. However, the sword in his hand changed when he brandished it. It turned into a soft sword made of green silk. The sword was as thin as a wing and as light as a veil. The two swords clashed. The sword in Zhou's hand was like silk as it wrapped around the heavy sword. Using the momentum, he flung the heavy sword away and sent it crashing into a large sword grave. Buzz! Buzz! Terrifying ancient swords broke out of the tomb one after another, bringing with them boundless sword chi, as if they were bent on destroying Zhou and the sword in his hand. However, Zhou showed no fear as he brandished his sword to meet the terrifying mythical swords. When Zhou struck out, the sword in his hand transformed into a myriad of forms. When he faced any sword, his sword move, and sword intent would transform into a form that countered his opponent. Even though the other party was at the mythical stage, one level higher than him, Zhou wasn't at a disadvantage in battle. 7 mythical swords joined the battle. Zhou fought alone with his sword and only used sword techniques to fight them. He wasn't at a disadvantage against the 7 swords. When Zhou was in high spirits, the sword pill in his hand transformed into the bamboo blade. He fused with the blade and used immortal slaying to snap one of the mythical swords. However, due to using too much strength and expending too much energy before Zhou could recover, he was swarmed by the 6 mythical swords and slashed at him. Seeing the game screen turn black, Zhou wasn't vexed at all. Instead, he was overjoyed. Without a doubt, his sword technique had advanced to the mythical stage, and sword pill had advanced to a perfect body. After dripping his blood to revive, he reopened the game and looked at the blood-colored avatar's information. Indeed, sword pill had advanced to a perfect body. Strangely, sword pill's name didn't change this time. It was still sword pill. Among the life souls that changed their names during the first evolution, only sword pill didn't change its name after the second evolution. It was the only one. Zhou looked at his skill column again, and indeed, there was an additional mythical sword technique. Heart-defying sword. Mythical Zhou was very satisfied with this sword technique. Although he knew quite a number of divine skills, the only divine skills he had mastered were transcendent flying immortal and heart-defying sword. Of course, the level given by the game wasn't important to Zhou. What was important was that he finally knew how to use a sword. Furthermore, it was a very special sword technique. As sword pill advanced to a perfect body, his strength stat reached 41 points. Now, the only stat left was speed. I never expected that I would be the last to reach 41 points for my speed stat despite being best at movement techniques. Zhou couldn't help but sigh. There were some things that he couldn't control. If he had a choice, he would definitely raise his speed stat first, but he couldn't do as he wished. Thankfully, he only needed to raise Glimmer to a perfect body to raise his speed stat to 41 points. If everything went smoothly, he could use the Lost Immortal Sutra to advance to the mythical stage. Zhou entered the ancient sword tomb again. This time, he no longer had the utilitarian mindset he had when practicing his swordsmanship. However, with the heart-defying sword intent, and sword pill, he had a good way to grind the ancient sword tomb. As long as he stimulated the heart-defying sword intent with all his might, he could trigger the 10,000 swords and make the mythical sword take the initiative to attack him. Indeed, when Zhou used the heart-defying sword intent, the entire ancient sword tomb boiled again. 10,000 swords hummed in unison as many ancient swords automatically broke out of the tomb in a bid to kill Zhou. Unfortunately, they couldn't pass sword pill's test and were all sliced apart. Finally, the mythical sword was unleashed. Unlike before, only 6 mythical swords appeared this time. Furthermore, the mythical swords this time were somewhat different from the 6 mythical swords from before. Zhou estimated that 7 mythical swords would spawn every time the ancient sword tomb respawned. But the kind of mythical sword that spawned wasn't fixed. This time, Zhou had no intention of practicing his swordsmanship. After luring the mythical swords out, he activated his mythical companion Heavenly Pets. The 6 mythical swords were no match for them, and were quickly killed. Ding! One of the mythical swords dropped a companion egg. From the looks of it, I'm really lucky. Copper Sparrow dropped not long ago, and now another one. Zhou picked up the companion egg and was overjoyed. It was actually the Knight Immaculate Sword. Among the 3 famous swords, there was the superior grade Light Concealment, the middle grade Shadow Bearing, and the inferior grade Knight Immaculate. Now that Zhou had the superior grade and inferior grade, he lacked the middle grade Shadow Bearing. If I can gather all 3 swords, I wonder if I can fuse the 3 into one? Zhou thought to himself. However, it wasn't easy for Knight Immaculate to drop. He didn't know when Shadow Bearing would drop. After all, the famous swords in the ancient sword tomb respawned randomly. It wasn't possible for Shadow Bearing to drop every time. Chapter 982. Night Drill. Mythical Life Providence. Tangible Sword Life Soul. Tangible Sword Aura Wheel of Destiny. Night Drill Strength. 80 Speed. 80 Constitution. 80 Essence Energy. 81 Talent Skill. Sword Aura Slash. Sword Aura Wheel. Sword Aura Rain. Dao Integration Strike Companion Form. Sword Night Drill's attributes were very similar to Light Concealment, but they were somewhat different. It was also considered a top-notch companion beast, but Night Drill couldn't be invisible. Zhou summoned Knight Immaculate Sword and saw that it was condensed from a blob of sword aura. Although he could see it, he could only see a blob of white sword aura. It was like a sword condensed from a thick white fog. After giving it a try, Night Drill's various skills were similar to Light Concealment. However, one was a sword beam, while the other was a sword aura. After matching Light Concealment with Night Drill, the compatibility between the two reached 91%. If he wanted to fuse them, the success rate was very high. However, Zhou didn't choose to fuse them. He still wanted to wait for the Shadow-Bearing Sword to see what difference the 3 swords would have. Zhou grinded for another 2 days, but he didn't see the Shadow-Bearing Sword. However, the 7 Seas Dragon King finally moved. Indeed, the 7 Seas Dragon King arrived at the man's palace. The man wasn't inside. The 7 Seas Dragon King passed through the palace and arrived behind it. Zhou immediately saw the man, Feng Shuyan, and Qinling Feng Shuyan was locked in a crystal coffin, looking like he was asleep. As for Qinling, she was in a huge instrument. Part of the instrument was a crystal tank with pure water inside. It was very similar to the water in the Death Water Zone. Qinling was inside the pure water. The pale, golden scales on her body had already covered her body, and dragon horns grew on her head. She looked like a golden dragon. Zhou didn't know if Qinling's state was considered mature, but from the looks of it, the man's experiment was already underway. Zhou sized up the instrument, but he couldn't tell what it was used for. 7 seas, the time is ripe. Gather all the dimensional creatures in the 7 seas, the man said to the 7 Seas Dragon King. After the 7 Seas Dragon King heard the order, he raised his 7 strange dragon-like tentacles. The strange dragons opened their mouths and let out a silent roar. Using Truth Listener, Zhou could hear a high-frequency sound wave. This sound wave couldn't be heard by ordinary ears, but all the dimensional creatures in the 7 Dragons Sea Zone were approaching the abyss after hearing it. The sea snakes of the seabed blue hole, the lobsters of the Deathwater Zone, the clam girls of Infinite Island, and all sorts of dimensional creatures were gathering towards the abyss. What does that man want? Zhou felt that something was amiss. Qinling, we can begin now. A large number of dimensional creatures arrived outside the palace, but they could only swim in the seawater. They didn't enter the palace protected by a mysterious force. If I do as you say, will you let Feng Shuyan off? Qinling asked through gritted teeth. I bearing Bear Falls Dragon King. God King said. I God King said. I King of King. Qin Ling glanced at Feng Qiuyan in the crystal coffin and gritted her teeth. She bit her tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood. This mouthful of blood was somewhat different from ordinary blood. It was golden in color. After the golden blood flowed out, it immediately mixed with the pure water. After being diluted by a large amount of pure water, the mouthful of blood quickly disappeared. The man reached out and pressed the start of the instrument. The liquid in the huge jar spewed upwards and fused into the seawater above his head. After the countless dimensional creatures outside came into contact with the liquid in the jar, some low-level dimensional creatures quickly underwent changes. The sea snake actually grew claws, and scales grew on the clam girl's fair skin. All sorts of dimensional creatures seemed to undergo changes. Even the fish dimensional creatures grew claws. Could it be? Zhou suddenly came to a realization. After these dimensional creatures evolved, they had characteristics that were close to dragons. Although they were still far from being comparable to real dragons, their bodies now looked like they could move on land. These dimensional creatures that were originally in the sea might very well break out of the seven dragons' sea and inner land. Just the thought of it terrified him. It was impossible for the people of Sea Return City to fend off so many dimensional creatures. Should I go out and stop him now? Zhou felt that even if he went out, he probably couldn't stop the man from doing all of this. If it was one terrorgrade, he could still think of a way to deal with one or two. It would probably be difficult for Zhou to deal with two terrorgrade creatures. Primordial Spore, hurry up. Zhou could only wait for the Primordial Spore's parasitism to succeed. If he could control the Seven Seas Dragon King to fight the man, there was still a chance to salvage the situation. More and more sea creatures came here to receive the baptism of the liquid containing Qin Ling's blood. Their bodies were gradually changing. After Qin Ling spat out the mouthful of golden blood, the man didn't force her to do anything else. However, Qin Ling looked very dispirited. The mouthful of golden blood wasn't as simple as ordinary blood. All the dimensional creatures in the Seven Dragons' Sea were mutating. The more time passed, the more intense the changes in their bodies became. Even the dimensional creatures that had completed their evolution didn't leave. They kept circling the abyss. Zhou could sense that the Seven Seas Dragon King's consciousness was gradually turning blurry. Primordial Spore was silently parasitizing its soul. It was already very powerful to be able to parasitize a creature with a terror form in such a short period of time. However, the situation was too urgent. Zhou still felt that it was too slow. In just a few days, a large number of dimensional creatures in the Seven Dragons' Sea had mutated. They possessed some of the characteristics of dragons and had grown to a certain extent. Qihai, it's done. Let them step onto land and turn all the humans in the world into dragon men. The man ordered Qihai. Should I get a try? Zhou wondered if he should go out and stop him now, but on second thought, he gave up on the idea. If he went out and risked his life, the chances of turning the situation around were very low. The man had been ordering the Seven Seas Dragon King to control the marine dimensional creatures. From the looks of it, he didn't have such an ability. Since the Seven Seas Dragon King is the key to controlling this mutated dimensional creature, as long as the Primordial Spore can successfully parasitize it, it can completely reverse the situation. Since Feng Qiuyan and Qin Ling weren't in danger for the time being, Zhou decided to wait and see. Zhou told Mia about the situation outside and his judgment. After Mia heard that, she heaved a sigh of relief. Since the man hadn't killed Qin Ling, the other matters weren't that important to her. Although I don't know what method that man used, I'm certain that those mutated creatures aren't going ashore to eat humans. They should be infecting humans with the mutated blood in their bodies, Mia said after some thought. Chapter 983. The people of Sea Return City realized that something was amiss in the past few days. The dimensional zones on land were fine, but they couldn't find any dimensional creatures in the dimensional zones in the sea. All the dimensional creatures in the sea seemed to vanish. Sea God Reef, Undersea Blue Hole, Infinite Island, and other places were empty. There is almost no sign of dimensional creatures. The Hui family contacted all the families in Sea Return City to discuss countermeasures. As for the Feng family, they were also vexed over Feng Chuyin and Qin Ling's disappearance. They had already sent people to search everywhere, but they couldn't find their whereabouts. The situation in the Seven Dragons Sea is very strange now. All the dimensional creatures have vanished. Everyone, tell me, what does this mean? Old Master Hui swept his gaze across the core members of the various families. The disappearance of the dimensional creatures is a good thing for us. We don't rely on the dimensional zones in the sea to begin with. All we need to do is guard the dimensional zones and mineral deposits ashore, said a family head with the surname Liu. That's true, but I'm afraid that the dimensional creatures in the sea will cause trouble again, said an elder from the Feng family. What can happen? After all, they're dimensional creatures in the sea. Only a small number of them have the ability to fight out of the sea. Most of them will have their combat strength greatly reduced once they get ashore. They won't pose any danger to us. Family head Liu paused before saying, besides, aren't we already prepared? Even if Sea Return City really can't be defended, we can retreat into the dimensional zones on land. Everyone has been operating there for a long time. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Brother Liu is right. After all, those things are from the sea. At most, they would just circle around and leave. It's not like they can grow legs to fight for territory with us. Another family head said, that's right. Everyone immediately began talking. Most people felt that they should stay and continue watching. Even if something really happened, it wouldn't be too late to retreat. I think we should evacuate immediately. A different voice sounded. Everyone looked at the person who spoke and saw that the person who spoke was a young man in his 20s. Most people knew that he was Hui Haifeng from the Hui family. Young Master Phone, what do you mean? Family head Liu asked Hui Haifeng. Hui Haifeng took out a small bottle and held in his hand so that everyone could see what was inside. The bottle wasn't big, about the size of a mineral water bottle. It was also filled with water, but there was something that looked like a mushroom in the water. It was the same as the test subjects he had shown Zhouwen. However, that thing was supposed to be white, but now it was glowing with a pale gold color. It looked very strange. What is this? Old Master Hui looked at Hui Haifeng and asked. He knew that Hui Haifeng was doing research, and he also supported Hui Haifeng, but he never thought that Hui Haifeng would really be able to research something. Grandpa, this is a sample of the fungi that I extracted from the marine plants and cultivated. Originally, it would take at least a year for these fungi to evolve from spores to what they are now. However, I just began nurturing this test subject this morning, but it has already evolved to such a level. Something terrible must have happened in the Seven Dragons Sea. It's very likely that the dimensional creatures in the sea will undergo a large-scale evolution, so we have to evacuate immediately, Hui Haifeng said seriously. Young Master Feng, aren't your words a little too arbitrary? Perhaps your experiments have gone wrong, or perhaps it's just an isolated phenomenon. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. Perhaps you need more experiments, Liu family head said disapprovingly. He wasn't particularly interested in the so-called scientific research. Young Master Feng, your words are a little too arbitrary. He even felt that scientific research was useless in this era. It was the era of God, and science was no longer useful. There were many people who thought like family head Liu. Furthermore, most people were unwilling to abandon Sea Return City and the mineral deposits that they had been operating for so many years and evacuate. After all, Hui Haifeng was only making a deduction. No one knew if his deduction would come true. Even if it came true, it wouldn't be too late to leave when they really couldn't stop the dimensional creatures. They still had the dimensional zones they operated on land as a retreat. Everyone, you might not know what this evolution speed means. Let me give you an analogy. According to this evolution speed, if an ordinary rat were to be injected with this element, it would only take 3 days. In 3 days, it would evolve to the body and strength of an elephant. If the creatures in the sea have such an evolution speed, do you still have the confidence to safely evacuate under their attacks? Do you still have the confidence to defend the dimensional zones? Hui Haifeng said. Young Master Foam, this is only your deduction after all. You can't just rely on your deduction to make us leave our homes, right? Family head Lu pondered for a moment and said, why don't we do this? We'll send some people with strong abilities in the water to investigate what happened in the sea. If it's really as you said, it won't be too late for everyone to leave. Yes. Family head Lu makes sense. Let's investigate it first. Many people supported family head Lu's suggestion. In the end, Hui Haifeng failed to persuade them. After all, Sea Return City wasn't something Hui Haifeng's family had the final say. Furthermore, even within the Hui family, many people felt that Hui Haifeng was being too alarmist. In fact, many members of the Hui family disapproved of Hui Haifeng's research. If it wasn't for the fact that Hui Haifeng paid for his research himself, they definitely wouldn't have let him do so much. After the meeting ended, Li Xian, who was waiting outside, asked Hui Haifeng, how is it? Hui Haifeng shook his head and said, it's useless. They have already been blinded by interest and comfort. They won't believe it unless they see the apocalypse with their own eyes. Li Xian said gloomily, then what should we do? Old Zhou and little Yin Yin are missing. Something big is definitely going to happen. Let's return to the lab first. I need to make some preparations. I have to move the important things out first. We can't stay here. Hui Haifeng quickly rushed to the lab. He knew that he didn't have much time left. Li Xian brought Ye and followed Hui Haifeng back to make preparations. At the same time, Sea Return City sent some humans with underwater abilities to enter the Seven Dragons Sea to investigate the disappearance of the dimensional creatures. What's there to investigate? Isn't that unnecessary? It's better that the dimensional creatures in the sea are gone. It saves us the trouble of coming ashore to harass us every once in a while, a middle-aged man said. It's all because of that young master Hui Haifeng. He said that there will be a huge anomaly in the sea. It's not like we haven't seen it before. What's there to make a fuss about? He even said that he wants us to move away from Sea Return. I think he's been reading too much and has turned his brain silly. What famous university? He doesn't know what he's talking about. The others laughed. They felt that a young master like Hui Haifeng only knew how to give orders blindly. What's that? Suddenly, someone realized that there seemed to be something in the seawater in front of them. A sea snake? That's not right. Why does it look like it has claws? Furthermore, the color isn't right. A sea snake should be blue. This one looks blue with a hint of gold. It's just a sea snake. Just kill it and bring it back for research. Just as they were about to move, they suddenly saw the strange sea snake rush out. Its speed was much faster than the average sea snake. Before one of them could react, he was bitten by the sea snake. Chapter 984. The people beside him swarmed forward and immediately sliced the strange sea snake into pieces. Old Li, don't be afraid. My companion beast can restrain the sea snake's poison. I'll treat you now, the person said as he summoned a companion beast to treat the bitten person's poison. He had treated the sea snake's poison many times, so it wasn't a troublesome problem. Indeed, the wound was quickly healed. There didn't seem to be any symptoms of being poisoned. Let's go quickly. Let's go ahead and take a look. If we can't find it, let's quickly return. Don't waste time here. The dimensional creatures in the sea have little to do with us, the few of them said as they continued diving deeper into the sea. However, they didn't realize that something was amiss with Old Li behind them. His eyes gradually turned golden, and tiny golden spots appeared on his face. After a while, Old Li suddenly pounced on the person in front of him as though he had gone mad. He opened his mouth and bit down on the person's neck. The person was caught off guard and was bitten. He screamed and turned to look at Old Li, only to see that his pupils had completely turned golden. There were many more guards on Sea Return City's sentry post. They were still concerned about the mysterious disappearance of dimensional creatures in the sea, but they were unwilling to leave Sea Return City just like that. In fact, most people could guess that something major had happened in the sea, but they were still hoping to get lucky. They're back. The guard on the sentry post discovered the people who had gone into the sea to investigate. 1, 2, 3, 7. All of them are back. I knew it. Nothing happened. Didn't they all return safely? If a huge anomaly really happened in the sea, how could they return so safely? The guard said happily. He had been on tenterhooks for the past 2 days, afraid that the huge anomaly Hui Haifeng mentioned was true. Old Li, how's the situation in the sea? Did you discover any mutated creatures? A few familiar guards greeted the people who had gone into the sea from afar. However, Old Li and company didn't say a word. They walked over with their heads lowered. I'm asking you a question. Why aren't you speaking? A guard leader said unhappily. When Old Li and the others got close, they finally raised their heads. When the guard saw them, they shivered and immediately shouted, "Not good!" Old Li and the others' eyes turned golden, and scales grew on their faces. They looked terrifying and strange. As soon as they shouted, Old Li and the others bared their fangs and pounced on them. For a moment, the sentry post was in chaos. Someone sent out an alarm signal. When a few families saw the alarm signal, they were alarmed. They immediately organized people to observe, but they didn't discover any dimensional creatures on the coast. The sentry post was actually fighting their own people. Several families hurriedly brought people over to find out what was going on. When they arrived, the last conscious guard was bitten on the neck by Old Li. Everyone was shocked and frightened by Old Li and the others. What was even more terrifying was that the guards who had fallen to the ground dared to stand up again after a while. The eyes of the guards also began to turn golden, and golden spots appeared on their faces. However, they had yet to grow into scales. Infected. This word popped up in everyone's mind. Do it. Kill them all. We can't leave them alive. It's contagious. Old Master Hui immediately made a decision and gave the order. Only then did the frightened people react. No one dared to rush forward to fight them. Thankfully, there were enough people. They summoned their companion beasts and got them to fight them. They were surprised to discover that Old Li and company's bodies had become as hard as steel. Furthermore, their speed was terrifying. Furthermore, they didn't seem to feel ordinary injuries. Only by stabbing their hearts could they be killed. They no longer looked like humans, but more like dimensional creatures. Thankfully, only their bodies had become stronger. Their intelligence looked much weaker. Finally, with everyone's cooperation, they finally killed all the infected people. These corpses can't be left alive. Burn them. As soon as Old Master Hui finished speaking, everyone turned to look at the sea. No one went to burn the body. Wind and waves suddenly rose on the sea, and there seemed to be something surging within the wind and waves. Soon they saw what it was. Countless dimensional creatures, prawns, crabs, octopuses, sea snakes, and many strange creatures that they couldn't name, rushed up with the sea. It was unknown how many there were. What was even more terrifying was that they couldn't recognize the dimensional creatures they were previously familiar with. The sea snake had grown claws, and so did the shark. They rushed to the shore and charged at everyone with their fangs and claws. Retreat. Return to the city immediately. Everyone in the city, retreat into the dimensional zone. Old Master Huey's expression changed drastically as he shouted. Everyone's faces were pale. The dimensional creatures that swarmed over had exceeded their imagination. Apart from escaping, they had no second thought. Something even more terrifying happened. A large number of winged fish flew towards Sea Return City from the sky. The high wall was useless. The entire Sea Return City was in chaos. After some people were injured by the dimensional creatures, their bodies became strange. Those with strong bodies could still last for a period of time, but those with weak bodies quickly had their eyes turn golden. Golden spots began to appear on their skin. It's over. By the time Old Master Hui returned to the city, he saw that someone had been infected. Now, everyone was filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they would have listened to Hui Haifeng and moved away from Sea Return City. No matter how valuable the minerals here were, they wouldn't be able to enjoy them if they died here. Everyone, take refuge in the dimensional zone. Retreat immediately. Everyone retreat into the dimensional zone. Old Master Hui shouted as he killed. Now, It was only the invasion of flying fish. There were many of them, but compared to the dimensional creatures that rushed out of the coast, it was nothing. Without Old Master Huey's shout, everyone was fleeing for their lives. Instantly, Sea Return City seemed to have turned into hell. There were sounds of killing and tragic screams everywhere. However, no one died. All the injured people stood up after a while, but when they stood up, they became members of the dimensional creatures and were no longer humans. The few families retreated as they fought. They gathered in a dimensional zone. It was the dimensional zone they had been operating for the longest time. They wanted to use the taboo in the dimensional zone to block these creatures. Boom! With the huge tsunami, a terrifying monster appeared. It looked like a huge octopus, but its tentacles were like WIRMS. Each one was 100 meters long. All sorts of horrifying creatures followed the horrifying monster and rushed over. The high walls were directly destroyed, unable to provide any protection at all. Chapter 985. The humans who wanted to leave Sea Return City suddenly realized that the path out of the city was blocked by dimensional creatures. The Seven Seas Dragon King, who was like a fiend celestial, led a large number of dimensional creatures to block their way out. There were tide-like dimensional creatures everywhere, surrounding the entire Sea Return City. It was almost impossible to escape. I regret it. Old Master Hui was extremely regretful. He knew that there might be danger, but he never expected the entire city to be destroyed. If he had listened to his grandson, Hui Haifeng, and hardened his heart to abandon his family business and leave Sea Return City, he wouldn't have ended up in this state. The only consolation was that the Hui family had already sent some of their children to study elsewhere in advance. Although they said it was to study, it was actually to protect them. It could be considered a backup plan. If something really happened to Sea Return City, the Hui family wouldn't be wiped out. What was hateful was that because of Wang Mingyuan, Hui Haifeng had taken a leave of absence from school and returned home. The Hui family's most promising young man had to be buried with the family. Thinking of Hui Haifeng, Old Master Hui looked around, but he didn't see him. He couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Hui Haifeng had long expected a huge change. Perhaps he had already left Sea Return. Just as Old Master Hui was rejoicing, he realized that Hui Haifeng and a young man were charging over from the other side. The young man was carrying a girl who looked about 1 or 2 years old. Afeng, you already expected such a thing to happen. Why aren't you leaving? Old Master Hui was angry and anxious when he saw Hui Haifeng charge over. The Hui family is here. How can I leave alone? I have some things here that will be useful to those dimensional creatures. Just rub some on your body. There's too little time. I've only figured out this little use, Hui Haifeng said as he poured some powder from a bottle and distributed it to Old Master Hui and company. Li Xian distributed to the others. Hui Haifeng gave a bottle to Li Xian. Li Xian responded and brought 2 ice silkworms over. Wherever the ice silkworms passed, they froze the dimensional creatures. Li Xian wasn't as gentle as Hui Haifeng. He scattered the powder on the people of Sea Return City. After the powder that resembled gold powder touched the humans, the dimensional creatures seemed to treat them as their own kind and stopped attacking them. Everyone was pleasantly surprised. There were dimensional creatures everywhere, like a tidal wave. They originally thought that there was no hope, but they never expected the divine soldiers to descend from the heavens, giving them a chance to turn the tide in a situation of certain death. Soon, the people from Sea Return City were smeared with the golden powder. Large numbers of dimensional creatures passed by them. At most, they sniffed them and didn't attack them. It was the same for those who were injured and mutated. They didn't care about those who were smeared with gold powder. Instantly, the huge Sea Return City was surrounded by countless dimensional creatures, but no battles happened. Everyone walked slowly. Don't worry. Hui Haifeng breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the golden powder was effective. The time he had been given was just too short. He didn't have the time to do more research. However, he accidentally discovered that once one was stained with this special element, the dimensional creatures would treat the humans who were stained with the golden powder as their own kind and not attack them again. Everyone followed Hui Haifeng and silently traversed the sea of monsters. If it was only these monsters, Hui Haifeng might very well bring everyone out of danger. Unfortunately, the chaos this time wasn't limited to dimensional creatures. There was also a human. Furthermore, he was the mastermind behind all of this. Everyone was traversing the sea of monsters in trepidation when they suddenly saw a figure slowly descend from the sky. He stood above the Seven Seas Dragon King and looked down at everyone in Sea Return City like a god. Human. Hui Haifeng's heart skipped a beat. At this moment, he wasn't most afraid of dimensional creatures, but humans. Old Master Hui and the elders from the Feng family were all people who had seen great things. When they saw the figure, their expressions changed drastically. Clearly, they realized the problem. They stopped and looked at the black-armored man on the Seven Seas Dragon King's head. I never expected there to be someone with such foresight in Sea Return City. Not bad. The person looked at Hui Haifeng below, as though he was impressed. Who are you? Hui Haifeng asked with a solemn expression. My name has long been abandoned. If you must know a title, call me Ninth Arch, the man said indifferently. Are the dimensional creatures' mutations in these seas related to you? Hui Haifeng asked again. Consider it a gift from me. Do you like it? Ninth Arch said with a smile. You are also a human. Why are you doing this to us? Family Head Lu said with a trembling voice. Ninth Arch didn't answer. He didn't even look at Family Head Lu. He continued looking at Hui Haifeng and said, You should know that you have already guessed my painstaking efforts, right? Why don't you tell me? You are urging us to evolve, but it's obvious that you have failed. Those who are infected with this special element don't even have self-consciousness. Even if their bodies become stronger, it can't be considered a true, successful evolution, Hui Haifeng said. Ninth Arch smiled and said, You really do understand. However, your vision is still too narrow. Evolution itself is the survival of the fittest. Creatures that can't adapt to evolution will eventually be buried in the dust of history. My experiment didn't fail, but most people are too weak. Only those who are truly strong can be reborn in the tide of evolution and become an even greater new human. You mean that this evolution has a certain success rate? Then what's the success rate? Hui Haifeng asked again. 1 in 1,000, or even lower, but it's enough. It's already good enough that there are so many elites left on Earth. There's no need to waste resources on the defective ones. Anyway, they will be eliminated sooner or later. I'm just speeding up the speed of their elimination, Ninth Arch said casually. However, when Hui Haifeng and company heard this, they found it extremely cruel. There wasn't even 1 in 1,000 humans left. Such a massacre seemed to be a trivial matter to Ninth Arch. Furthermore, from what he meant, not only did he want to do these things in Sea Return City, but he also wanted to promote it to the entire human society. Don't you think it's too cruel to those who originally had a chance of living? Hui Haifeng said, How can failure be cruel? Letting useless people live numbly and wasting resources that are useful in the hands of experts is true cruelty. Ninth Arch looked down at Hui Haifeng and said, You are not bad. If you are willing, you could become my right-hand man and create a new human order with me. Chapter 986. Hui Haifeng took a deep breath. Although our thoughts are very similar, I'm sorry, we aren't the same kind of people. I also want humans to evolve, but I won't choose such a method. You're just deceiving yourself. I know you want to say that you will research an evolution method with a high success rate. But so what if the success rate is high? Even if it reaches a 100% success rate and everyone can become stronger, there will still be strong and weak due to different talent. The strong will become stronger, and the weak will become weaker. When the time comes, the strong will occupy most of the resources, and the weak will obtain less and less. Ninth Arch said with a sneer, just like how no matter how long a worker works, the capitalists will think that they haven't worked enough. No matter how low their salary is, they will think that it's too much. In order to squeeze out the last bit of value, the weak will eventually perish or even be killed by their powerful companions. Instead of waiting for such a cruel thing to happen and wasting so much time, why don't you let me complete this step directly? Not only will it save time, but it will also allow a genius like you to not have to think about how to snatch the last grain of rice from the weak in the future. Isn't this a happy ending? If there's a sin, let me bear it. Knight Thearch's eyes were firm and confident. Hui Haifeng knew that what he said wasn't an excuse for himself. He probably really thought so. I don't know if the situation you mentioned will happen, but I still want to give it a try, Hui Haifeng said. That's a pity. I really hope you can stay and help me. What a pity. However, it doesn't matter. If you can survive this, even without my help, you can prove your excellence. When that happens, you will understand everything I'm saying, Knight Thearch said as he waved his hand, gesturing for the Seven Seas Dragon King to begin. The Seven Seas Dragon King raised his strange dragon-like tentacles and let out a silent roar. The dimensional creatures that had stopped attacking humans began to surround the people of Sea Return City again. Everyone immediately fell into despair. Facing the dimensional creatures that were like a tidal wave, they had long lost all their fighting spirit. They originally imagined that they could escape with Hui Haifeng's gold powder, but they never expected to die. Suddenly, the dimensional creatures that were charging at the humans slowly stopped. The Seven Seas Dragon King's body trembled as though he was in an intense mental battle. Seven Seas, what happened? Knight Thearch frowned at the Seven Seas Dragon King. The Seven Seas Dragon King had actually disobeyed his orders. The Seven Seas Dragon King didn't respond. All it did was tremble even more. No matter how Knight Thearch ordered it, it didn't respond. The dimensional creatures also stopped, unsure what to do. Zhou ordered Primordial Spore to forcefully snatch control of the Seven Seas Dragon King's body from within. Primordial Spore hadn't completely occupied the Seven Seas Dragon King's soul, but there wasn't enough time. Zhou could only make such a choice. Although Primordial Spore hadn't completely occupied his soul, it had played a certain role. With the Seven Seas Dragon King restrained, it would be difficult for him to do anything for a short period of time. Something's wrong. Li Xian looked at the mentally ill Seven Seas Dragon King and realized that something might have happened. The people from Sea Return also looked eagerly at the Seven Seas Dragon King. Now, their fates no longer belonged to them. Whether they lived or died depended on a single thought from him. Although they knew that the chances were very low, they yearned for a miracle. Come out. Knight Thearch seemed to realize something. A cold glint flashed in his eyes as he pressed his hand on the Seven Seas Dragon King's head. A strange electric current-like force seeped into the Seven Seas Dragon King's body. Zhou sensed the terror of the force. He originally wanted to continue hiding for a while, but now he had no choice but to leave. He pulled Mia out of the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach and teleported out of the Seven Seas Dragon King's body. He arrived above the Seven Seas Dragon King's head and looked at Knight Thearch. The people from Sea Return City were alarmed. Another human had appeared above the Seven Seas Dragon King's head. It looked like a young man and woman. I knew it. Old Zhou wouldn't die so easily. Li Xian didn't find it strange when he saw Zhou. You're actually not dead? Knight Thearch was slightly surprised. He originally thought that Zhou would have been devoured by the Seven Seas Dragon King, but he never expected him to survive. Knight Thearch, it's best you stop. Now that the Seven Seas Dragon King no longer listens to your orders, your plan can't continue, Zhou said. Knight Thearch said indifferently, your strength isn't enough to affect the Seven Seas Dragon King. I believe you're relying on your companion beasts to affect it. As long as I kill you, your companion beasts will die together, and the Seven Seas Dragon King will naturally recover. Many people want to kill me, but they failed in the end. I don't think this will be easy, Zhou said as he gave Mia a look. Mia nodded and immediately turned to leave, flying towards the sea. Zhou had already discussed this with her. She was in charge of rescuing Qin Ling and Feng Qiuyan, while Zhou was in charge of holding back Knight Thearch. Knight Thearch saw through their thoughts at a glance, but he didn't stop Mia. This was because there was no need. As long as he finished Zhou, everything would return to normal. Wang Mingyuan is a figure. I never expected all the disciples he taught to be figures as well. Unfortunately, you didn't fuse with a guardian like Wang Mingyuan. Secondly, you didn't contract a guardian. You have no right to be my opponent, Ninth Arch said as he slowly raised his hand. There's nothing impressive about having guardians. I've killed a few, Zhou said. I'm afraid the guardians you killed can't even transform into their terraforms, right? Ninth Arch raised his right hand high before cleaving down like a blade. At the same time, he said, Today, I'll show you what true mythical power is. Zhou quickly retreated, hoping to dodge Knight Thearka's attack. However, Knight Thearka's strike didn't have any ordinary essence, energy, or light erupt. However, the original sky suddenly darkened, and the entire world seemed to turn into darkness. It was so dark that one couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. Nothing could be seen, and Night Emperor's figure also disappeared. What is fear? The unknown and the invisible are the true greatest fear. You can't see or touch a true Terragrade expert. As long as I'm willing, I can take your life at any time. This is a true god. It can't be resisted, nor can it be resisted. Knight Thearka's voice echoed in the boundless darkness as though it was everywhere, but it also didn't seem to be anywhere. So Gu. Chapter 987. All of Sea Returned City fell into darkness. Everyone seemed to become blind as the fear in their hearts was magnified countless times. Even epic experts with eyesight abilities couldn't see anything in the darkness. Apart from darkness, there was only darkness. It was as though it was an eternal night. Ordinary people were used to using their eyes. They were already flustered when they suddenly lost their vision. Furthermore, there were countless monsters around them, but they couldn't see them. They didn't know what they were doing. Were they preparing to pounce over and devour them? Had the dimensional creatures' bloody mouths already reached their necks? A large part of human fear came from their imagination. And this dark environment was the easiest environment for people to unleash their fear and imagination. Zhou didn't like to imagine, so while he used Truth Listener's ability, he also activated the Supreme Hell King Life Soul, allowing his senses to become extremely sharp. However, it was useless. Be it Truth Listener's ability or Supreme Hell King's enhanced senses, he failed to discover any traces of Night Arch. It was as though Night the Arch had melted into the night. Have you experienced true fear? Night Thearka's voice sounded in Zhou Wen's ear. However, Zhou didn't see Night Arch. As for the night, it seemed to transform into a blade that slashed across Zhou Wen's neck. Clang! The astral shell dragon armor appeared on Zhou Wen's body as he activated absolute defense. Even so, a thin mark appeared on the armor's neck guard. Absolute defense. This should be a manifestation of the astral shell dragon companion egg, right? You're really lucky. Although the astral shell dragon's abilities aren't much, absolute defense is an extremely powerful skill. Even at the Terra grade, it won't be that easy to break through absolute defense. Night Thearka's voice drifted over from an unknown location. It was as though Night Thearka's lips were whispering into Zhou Wen's left ear, but when Zhou Wen turned his head, he saw nothing. At this moment, the voice sounded in Zhou Wen's right ear again. Absolute defense is also one of the top abilities among the mythical abilities. Back then, I wanted to kill the astral shell dragon personally to see if a companion egg would drop. However, thinking that the chances were too low, I had no choice but to give up. I never expected you to take the astral shell dragon companion egg. Unfortunately, the astral shell dragon is only at the mythical stage without much potential after all. It can't enter its terror form and can't constantly activate absolute defense. It can only last half an hour at most. Zhou Wen turned his head to the right, but still didn't see anything. Half an hour. This is the last time you have to live in this world. Enjoy it. No, a minute has already passed. You still have 29 minutes. Night Thearka's evil voice entered Zhou Wen's ears like a demon. Facing the pressure of death, especially knowing when one might die, That kind of pressure and fear was enough to make one collapse. However, Zhou wasn't an emotional person. He knew that absolute defense couldn't protect him forever. Instead of feeling afraid, he might as well think about what to do next. Without any hesitation, his first thought was to run. Half an hour was enough for him to teleport a long distance away. However, in the darkness, Zhou teleported several times. He had already left Sea Return City, but all he saw was darkness. All the mountains and rivers were shrouded in darkness. They could hear, but not see. Do you want to leave? I can let you leave. Night Thearch's voice sounded in Zhou's ear again. It was so close that it made his hair stand on end. After Night Thearch said that, the sky brightened where Zhou was. However, it was still dark in Sea Return City. This scene was unbelievable. It was daytime on Zhou's side, but the city a few meters away was dark. He couldn't see anything. Didn't you want to escape? You can leave now, but the people here will become my experimental subjects to experience that 1 in 1,000 possibility. I wonder if there's anyone you care about among them? However, no matter how much you care, it can't be more important than your life, right? Night Thearch's voice sounded from the darkness. In the darkness, Night Thearch came to Hui Haifeng's side like a nightmare. Hui Haifeng felt his eyes light up as he could see clearly in the darkness. He punched, but Night Thearch's body was like a shadow of darkness. Hui Haifeng's fist passed through it, but it failed to injure him at all. Night Thearch smiled and said, "What do you think Zhou will choose? He's your senior brother, right? Can the friendship between the two of you transcend the fear of death?" Hui Haifeng said calmly, "I hope he leaves. With his abilities, he will definitely be able to defeat you in the future and avenge us." Hui Haifeng didn't shout for Zhou to leave quickly because he knew that such words would only stir up one's courage. He didn't need Zhou to have such courage now. It's really touching. Night Thearch came to Li Xian, Enya's side again. They immediately had the ability to see in the darkness. "Do you think Zhou will leave or return to save you?" Night Thearch asked with interest. Without a word, Li Xian released the ice silkworm, but it passed through Night Thearch, who was like a shadow. It failed to cause any damage to him. How interesting. Don't you wish for him to return to save you? Don't you care if he abandons you and flees? You once treated him as your best friend and best partner, but he fled alone in times of danger. How tragic. Night Thearch's voice sounded in the trio's ears. "If it were me, I would definitely return to save you, even if we have to live and die together. What will Zhou choose?" Night Thearch continued. Outside Sea Return City, Zhou stared at the dark and lightless city with a frown. "Do you want to escape or not? I'll give you 3 more seconds. If you don't want to escape, return to the darkness." Night Thearch's voice sounded from the darkness again. 1, 2, 3. When Night Thearch counted to 3, Zhou turned around and flew away, quickly disappearing. In the dark Sea Return City, Night Thearch gloated at Hui Haifeng and company. "What a pity. From the looks of it, your companion isn't reliable. Between survival and your friendship, he chose to live." "So what?" Li Xian suddenly said as he glanced at the depressed Ye in his arms. "Don't you feel abandoned at all?" Night Thearch looked at Li Xian with interest. "Of course. Old Zhou is a bastard. I wish I could slice him 1,000 times, but unfortunately, I might not have such a chance." Li Xian stroked Ye's head and said, "Zhou is a bastard like me. If it were just us here, he definitely wouldn't have returned. However, there's still the little princess he cares about the most here, so he will definitely return. Don't you think so?" Ye was taken aback. Her disappointed expression gradually disappeared as her eyes became determined. She nodded heavily. "Li Xian." Hui Haifeng frowned slightly. However, Li Xian waved his hand. "I know what you mean, but a bastard knows a bastard the best. Compared to letting others know that he will return, he will care more about Ye's feelings. We understand some things, but Ye is still young. We can't let her be traumatized. Even if she dies, she should leave happily." Chapter 988. You actually think he will return? Night the Arch was really interested. Human nature couldn't withstand a test. Night the Arch believed that it was impossible for Zhou Wen to return when he faced a life-and-death situation. Night the Arch really wanted to see the disappointed expressions of Li Xian, Hui Haifeng, and company, so he wasn't in a hurry to get the dimensional creatures to attack. He wanted Li Xian and company to slowly experience the process of going from hope to disappointment, and then from disappointment to despair. However, not long after, Night the Arch suddenly realized that a figure was rapidly approaching Sea Return City from afar. The figure was none other than Zhou Wen, who had returned. Zhou Wen hadn't really escaped previously. He only wanted to test if Night the Arch would really let him go, or if he had some other scheme. When Zhou Wen confirmed that he had really escaped and that Night the Arch wasn't chasing after him, he turned around and rushed back. Li Xian, Hui Haifeng, and Ye were trapped. Zhou Wen wasn't willing to give up while he still had the ability to do something. When Ye saw Zhou Wen fly back, she was delighted. Hui Haifeng and Li Xian's expressions were very solemn. Zhou Wen's return meant that they needed to risk their lives. No matter what they could do, no matter how trivial it was, as long as it could play an insignificant role in the battle, they would work hard to do it. Why did you come back? Night the Arch asked Zhou Wen with interest. I left something here. I came back to take it away, Zhou Wen said. What did you lose? Night the Arch asked. People from Sea Return City, Zhou Wen said. Are they your family and friends? Night the Arch asked. No, it's everyone in Sea Return City, Zhou Wen said seriously. Are you challenging my patience? Night the Arch's voice turned cold. With his voice, darkness devoured the area outside Sea Return City again, bringing Zhou Wen into darkness. He felt his body immerse in darkness again. Night the Arch seemed to be everywhere, existing in every corner of the darkness, but Zhou Wen didn't panic at all. Since he dared to come back, of course, he wouldn't come back brainlessly to die. Regardless of whether it was useful or not, he had already thought of some ideas, and he wanted to give it a try. Absolute defense can only last for half an hour at most, but that's only in theory. Under a powerful attack, due to the excessive consumption, absolute defense can only last for a shorter time. If I attack with all my might, you'll die in less than 10 minutes. To be honest, I don't want that to happen, Yi Di said. You can try and see if you can kill me in 10 minutes. Zhou Wen seemed to be confident and wasn't afraid of Night the Arch's threat. Originally, I didn't want to kill you, but since you insist on seeking death, it's hard for me to keep someone who is destined to die in this world. As Night the Arch spoke, the illusory figures seemed to vanish. Truth Listener could no longer hear anything related to Night the Arch. Now, I have to think of a way to break through the darkness and find the Night the Arch's true body before the absolute defense of the astral dragon armor disappears. Otherwise, if I can't even touch the Night the Arch's true body, there's no possibility of killing or severely injuring him. Clang, clang, clang. Night the Arch couldn't be seen, but blades that resembled the night strangely appeared everywhere. They were like invisible blades of darkness that slashed at Zhou Wen's body. Zhou Wen's body retreated repeatedly, but he couldn't see where Night the Arch was. He was like a ghost in the darkness, omnipresent, but he didn't have a real body. He couldn't be seen no matter how hard he looked. Even a terror-grade creature can't be completely without a body. Be it Ice Maiden or Talisman King, they have their true bodies. Night the Arch definitely has his true body. It's just that I haven't found it. Where's his true body? Zhou Wen used Truth Listener to listen to the surroundings again, but he still didn't discover anything. Even when Night the Arch attacked him, Zhou Wen couldn't sense his existence. How'd he do it? Zhou Wen couldn't think of a reason, so he could only choose to give it a try. The invisible blade in the darkness slashed at Zhou Wen's back again. Without even turning his head, Zhou Wen summoned a sword and slashed at his back. The sword carried scarlet flames. It was none other than the bronze sparrow sword he had just obtained. The flames produced by the bronze sparrow sword illuminated Zhou Wen's surroundings, but it was only limited to a very close range. Further away, it was still darkness. The light of the flames couldn't completely expel the darkness, nor could he discover Knight Thearka's figure nearby. A strange black palm shadow rushed out of Zhou when shadow and slashed at his thigh. Thankfully, the astral shell dragon's armor blocked the strike. Otherwise, Zhou Wen's legs would probably have been severed. Zhou Wen's body streaked out in the darkness. Although he was protected by absolute defense and wasn't really injured, the pain from his leg made Zhou Wen clearly know that the effects of absolute defense were weakening. It was undoubtedly terrifying to fight someone who couldn't be seen or touched, but could injure or even kill him. Although this strike wasn't effective, it didn't mean that it was useless. At the very least, Zhou Wen had already realized that the light emitted by the flames was still somewhat effective against the darkness. However, the mythical flames could only illuminate a radius of 3 feet around the bronze sparrow sword. The area it could illuminate was very limited. Furthermore, Knight Thearch seemed to only be able to walk in the darkness. The strike just now was an attack launched from a dark shadow, illuminated by the light. Zhou Wen attempted to use the bronze sparrow sword to attack from different directions, but he naturally failed to injure Knight Thearch. However, he was certain that Knight Thearch had to be in the darkness to launch an omnipresent attack. He had never appeared in the light. Now, Zhou Wen was roughly certain that even if Knight Thearch could attack in the light, he would definitely be unable to hide his body. To defeat Knight Thearch, he had to place him in the light. However, the bronze sparrow sword's flames weren't enough to illuminate all parts of Zhou Wen's body. Even if it was bright enough, there would be shadows. With shadows, there would be darkness. Knight Thearch could still attack Zhou Wen through the shadows. External light is useless unless my body can emit light. This doesn't seem difficult for me. Zhou Wen thought of his life soul, primordial human sovereign. As long as he fused with primordial human sovereign, he could become an existence like a human-shaped sun. However, he didn't know how far primordial human sovereign's light could illuminate. However, even a foot of distance was enough. Without any blind spots in the darkness, Knight Thearch should be able to see his true body if he attacked within a foot of distance. Chapter 989. Absolute Defense is indeed a very powerful ability. Unfortunately, if the companion beast with it is at the Terra grade, then it can be considered a true absolute defense. On the Astral Shell Dragon, this ability is a waste. Now, that armor can't even last a minute. Once absolute defense completely fails, it will be the end of your life. Knight Thearka's devil-like voice sounded in the darkness again, but his attacks didn't stop. Perhaps that will be the end of your life, Zhou Wen said indifferently. I'm very curious. What's the source of your confidence? Apart from the Astral Shell Dragon, what other trump cards do you have? Why don't you use them all together? Let me see what power you are relying on. Knight Thearch was really curious. From a moment Zhou Wen returned, Knight Thearka's interest in him was rather strong. He didn't underestimate Zhou Wen. On the contrary, after Zhou Wen really returned, the importance he placed on Zhou Wen had risen to a rather high level. However, Knight Thearch still wanted to know what Zhou Wen was relying on to return. However, Knight Thearch wouldn't let go of the opportunity to kill Zhou Wen because of his curiosity. He would still kill Zhou Wen the moment the Shell Dragon armor failed. Therefore, he hoped to see Zhou Wen's trump card before that happened. Clang! The Shell Dragon armor was attacked again. This time, the blade condensed from the night directly sliced open a wound. It was deep to the bone as blood flowed out of the wound. This is your last chance. As Knight Thearch attacked again, his voice entered Zhou Wen's ears. Once the Shell Dragon armor was broken, absolute defense was useless. Knight Thearch could completely attack Zhou Wen's body through the ruptured wound and kill him directly. Zhou Wen also knew very well that this was indeed his last chance. If he couldn't block this strike, he would probably die here. In Sea Return City, only Li Xian, Hui Haifeng, received special treatment from Knight Thearch and could see everything. Seeing Zhou Wen bleed, the three of them tensed up. They wanted to rush over to help, but they seemed to be separated by a strange distance. No matter how they rushed to the battlefield, they couldn't reach it. It was as though they were standing in place. Almost at the instant Knight Darch attacked, Zhou changed his life soul and fused the primordial human sovereign life soul with him. Instantly, Zhou's body turned into a human-shaped sun. The range he illuminated was greater than he imagined. It was even greater than the mythical flaming sword that the bronze sparrow sword illuminated. And right in front of Zhou, Knight Darch stood there. He raised his fingers and stabbed at Zhou's already injured wound like a sword. There were cracks in his armor, and he didn't have any defense. They finally saw it. It wasn't just Zhou. Li Xian, Hui Haifeng, and company also saw Knight Thearka's true body appear in the light. Without any hesitation, Zhou threw the bronze sparrow sword out. Yes, it wasn't a stab, but a throw. This was the godly skill, Vajra drill. It was a skill that sacrificed one's weapon in order to unleash the strongest attack. With the augmentation of the diamond drill, the strength that erupted from this strike was equivalent to the combined strength of Zhou and the bronze sparrow sword. Its speed was unimaginable as the bronze sparrow sword stabbed into Knight Thearka's body and immediately exploded. Boom! Flames rose like the explosion of sun. A mythical weapon instantly unleashed all its energy. The destructive power produced was inestimable. The darkness that enveloped Sea Returned City finally vanished. Everyone regained their vision. Apart from Li Xian and a few others, no one knew what had happened. When their vision recovered, they saw Zhou floating in the air like a sun god and the intense explosion. Has that terrifying Knight Darch been killed? He should be dead. Even a mythical creature wouldn't be able to survive such a terrifying explosion. Everyone prayed for this outcome. However, when the light from the explosion gradually dissipated, they realized that Knight Darch was standing there unscathed. His long black hair was still as elegant as before, as though he wasn't injured at all. You're really impressive. You have more than one life soul, and you're so powerful. You can actually reflect my true body in my night of fear. Unfortunately, although your strike is extremely powerful, any mythical creature would lose half their life even if they didn't die. However, to a Terragrade, no matter how strong that power is, it's useless. Only the power of a Terragrade can defeat a Terragrade. You're still too weak. As Knight Darch spoke, he walked towards Zhou step by step. After seeing Zhou's trump card, he no longer had any curiosity. He had no regrets killing Zhou. Zhou touched the scabbard in his left hand with his right hand. The bronze sparrow sword condensed in the scabbard again. Weapons destroyed by the Vajra drill typically vanished. However, because the bronze sparrow sword had the ability to be reborn in the scabbard, it wouldn't really disappear. It was also the best weapon to use the Vajra drill in reality. Zhou once again threw out the bronze sparrow sword with the Vajra drill. Knight Darch didn't dodge as he reached out to grab the flying bronze sparrow sword, causing it to explode in his hand. It was useless. His body was like a god's body that couldn't be injured by mortal powers. No matter how terrifying the power unleashed by the bronze sparrow sword was, it couldn't injure Knight Darch at all. Zhou threw out the bronze sparrow sword again and again, but it was like he was releasing fireworks. Is he a god? Everyone from Sea Returned City was dumbfounded as indescribable fear rose in their hearts. Under such a terrifying explosion, he wasn't injured at all. He was no different from a god. Knight Darch was somewhat disappointed because the Night of Fear was useless against Zhou. He didn't activate it again. He destroyed everything with a powerful wave of his hand and arrived in front of Zhou. He didn't even give Zhou a chance to draw his sword as he slapped Zhou's head with one hand, hoping to end his life. With absolute defense completely gone, it was impossible for Zhou to withstand the palm. Zhou's right hand still moved. However, this time, he didn't pull out the bronze sparrow sword with his right hand, nor did he use the Vajra drill. An icy blue dragon tooth that looked like it was carved from sapphire appeared in Zhou's right hand. Then, it flashed with the power of darkness right hand. It was so fast that no one could see it. By the time everyone saw it, The icy blue dragon tooth in Zhou Wen's hand had already penetrated Knight Thearch's chest. Chapter 990. Knight Thearch looked down his chest and saw blood slowly flowing out of the ice-blue dragon tooth. Ice Dragon King's tooth. Knight Thearch's face instantly turned extremely pale. Zhou Wen let go of the dragon tooth. His palm that held the dragon tooth had already frozen. If he continued holding it, his palm and armor would probably freeze to pieces. Didn't you say that only a Terrorgrade can injure a Terrorgrade? As you wish. Zhou Wen pulled out an ice dragon rib with his left hand and slashed at Knight Thearch again. Zhou Wen also wanted to use Dr. Darkness's darkness right hand with his right hand, but his right hand was already numb from the cold. He couldn't raise it at all. The power of the Terrorgrade was just too terrifying. Just holding the dragon tooth to attack was already something his palm couldn't withstand. Therefore, he could only switch to his left hand. Although his left hand wasn't as sick as Darkness' right hand, it was augmented by Dr. Darkness's golden left hand. Its speed and strength were much stronger. Furthermore, Zhou Wen's strike was immortal slaying, which Slaughterer had participated in. It was unbelievably fast. With a flash, he intersected with Knight Thearch. As he switched life souls, the sun-like light vanished, revealing Zhou Wen's true appearance. As for Knight Thearch's arm, it was forcefully severed by Zhou Wen. However, Knight Thearch vanished like a phantom, fleeing without a trace. Only an arm and the dragon tooth that had stabbed into his chest fell out. He actually managed to escape? Zhou Wen was somewhat disappointed, but he didn't chase after him. His left hand was already frostbitten, so it was impossible for his two hands to use the ice dragon's body parts. Furthermore, after using immortal slaying, his strength was exhausted. He might not be able to gain an advantage even if he chased after him. The people from Sea Return City didn't know Zhou Wen's current situation. Seeing him easily injure the godlike Knight Thearch with 2 strikes and sever one of his arms, they looked at Zhou Wen with reverence. Let them return to the sea, Zhou Wen said to the 7 Seas Dragon King. Although the 7 Seas Dragon King's consciousness hadn't been completely parasitized, its resistance suddenly weakened after Knight Thearch escaped. Primordial Spore had the upper hand. Although it was still difficult to destroy the 7 Seas Dragon King's consciousness, some simple control was enough. With Zhou Wen's order, the 7 Seas Dragon King's 7 strange dragon-like tentacles roared at the sky. The mutated marine dimensional creatures retreated into the 7 dragons' sea like a tide. Seeing a powerful dimensional creature like the 7 Seas Dragon King listen to Zhou Wen's orders, everyone's expressions turned even odder. They found it unbelievable that he was only a human youth. Many people from the Hui and Feng families recognized Zhou Wen and knew that he was Hui Haifeng and Feng Qiuyan's classmate. Their expressions turned even odder. Back when Feng Qiuyan mentioned Zhou Wen to his elders, he even said that Zhou Wen had taught him many things. Back then, the Feng family didn't think much of it. But now, from their point of view, Feng Qiuyan was extremely lucky to be able to learn from Zhou Wen. I'm going to the underwater abyss to take a look. Do you want to come with me? Zhou Wen was afraid that Knight Thearch would return to the underwater palace to find trouble with Mia and company, so he landed on the 7 Seas Dragon King's head and asked Li Xian and Hui Haifeng. We'll go with you. Li Xian chased after him with in his arms. Hui Haifeng also boarded the 7 Seas Dragon King. The 7 Seas Dragon King reluctantly headed for the sea and quickly disappeared into the raging waves. Old Master Hui, are we still leaving Sea Return City? Family head Lu walked in front of Old Master Hui and asked carefully. The others also looked at Old Master Hui eagerly. Although they usually treated Old Master Hui as their leader, they were clearly more respectful now. Old Master Hui knew very well that the reason they were so respectful wasn't because he was the head of the Hui family. It was mainly because of Hui Haifeng and Zhou Wen. Although he didn't know if Zhou Wen had called Hui Haifeng along on purpose or not, it had undoubtedly helped the Hui family greatly. In the future, It would be much more convenient for the Hui family to do things in Sea Return City, especially matters related to Hui Haifeng. As for Hui Haifeng's previous research results, everyone saw his potential and possibilities. They no longer dared to underestimate him. If not for Hui Haifeng's gold powder, they would have long been infected. They wouldn't have had the chance to wait for Zhou when it come out. The members of the Feng family were also secretly plotting. Feng Qiuyin and Zhou Wen's relationship wasn't any weaker than Hui Haifeng's. It seemed like they should do something. There's no need to leave for the time being. However, the situation is unpredictable. It's best everyone return and pack up. Go out and think of a solution to leave a way out for the family, Old Master Hui said ambiguously. However, his words resonated with everyone's thoughts. They were in a hurry to escape. Previously, they hadn't been able to bring many things out. Now, they could go back and take them. They had to slowly transfer their family assets out. Even if they could stay in Sea Return, they couldn't treat this place as their foundation. Before Zhou Wen and company arrived at the underwater abyss, they saw Mia return with Qin Ling and Feng Shuyan. They weren't in much of a problem, but they had been imprisoned in the palace by Ninth Arch. It wasn't easy for Mia to break the power that sealed them before saving them. Ninth Arch is also a strange person. You might say that he's ruthless, but he killed billions of people as easily as drinking cold water. However, he had so many opportunities, but he didn't kill us, Li Xian said. This person really can't be treated as a purely bad person, but sometimes such a person is more terrifying than a bad person. Zhou Wen paused before saying, "We still have to think of a way to resolve Qin Ling's problem. Otherwise, Ninth Arch will make a comeback sooner or later. If I'm not wrong, the source of those marine mutated creatures should be her, right?" Hui Haifeng sized up Qin Ling and said. Qin Ling nodded slightly. "I'm sorry for implicating everyone. There's no need to say that. You aren't wrong. It's this era that's wrong." Hui Haifeng thought for a moment before saying, "If you trust me, you can give me some time and cooperate with my research. Perhaps I can resolve the problem with you and prevent Night the Arch from finding trouble with you." Qin Ling looked at Hui Haifeng in puzzlement before looking at Feng Shuyan and Mia. Senior Hui has done a lot of research on biological mutations. Let him give it a try. Perhaps he really can do it. Even if he can't, there won't be a worse situation, Li Xian said. Li Xian still trusted Hui Haifeng's character. "If you trust us, you can let Senior give it a try," Zhou Wen said as well. Seeing Feng Qiuyin and Mia nod slightly, Qin Ling bowed at Hui Haifeng. "Qin Ling really doesn't know how to repay you. If you really succeed, helping us take care of junior brother Little Feng will be the repayment," Hui Haifeng said with a smile. Upon hearing Hui Haifeng's words, Zhou Wen knew that he had some confidence, but he didn't know what he was going to do. Zhou Wen didn't know any of this, nor could he help. All he wanted to do now was go to Night Thearka's Abyss Palace to take a look and see if there was anything there. He had previously found so many ice dragon items. Perhaps there was a similar place in the Deep Sea Palace. Chapter 991. The palace in the deep sea was already empty. Ordinary dimensional creatures didn't dare approach it. Night the Arch and the Seven Seas Dragon King, who lived here, had fled. The other had most of Primordial Spore's authority over him. Zhou Wen searched everywhere in the palace. He almost flipped the place upside down, but he didn't find anything. There were only some daily necessities and equipment here. From the looks of it, this palace was more like a place Night the Arch used for research. Zhou Wen wasn't interested in the research information and equipment here, but Hui Haifeng treated them as treasures. He treated them as treasures. Zhou Wen had no choice but to help him transport the equipment and information back. Although Hui Haifeng's research direction was similar to Night Thearka's, Hui Haifeng wasn't as radical as Night Arch. The results he could produce wouldn't be as unreliable as Night Thearka's. Without any gains, Zhou Wen went to the Seven Seas Dragon King's lair to take a look. This time, he really made a discovery. He discovered the blue glacier again. When he dug it out, he saw something that looked like a fingernail. It was very likely the tip of a dragon claw. This discovery delighted Zhou. He was still no match for a terror-grade creature, but with the help of these terror items, he had a chance of injuring a terror-grade creature or even killing it. Therefore, Zhou treated these items like treasures. Recalling that he hadn't been to Infinite Island where Dragon Granny was, Zhou made another trip to Infinite Island and found another terror item that looked like a dragon's whisker. The lair of the 7 Dragon Monarchs and the Dragon Sea Dragon King has the same terror item of the Ice Dragon King. If Knight the Arch killed the Ice Dragon King, why did he place these items in the 7 Dragon Monarchs' lair? Why didn't he collect them himself or destroy them? Zhou was puzzled. If he hadn't found the Ice Dragon King's terror item, it would have been very difficult for him to injure Knight the Arch. He might not have been able to stop him. In the empty Abyss Palace, Zhou took out all the Ice Dragon King's items: teeth, bones, scales, horns, whiskers, claws, eyes, and hair. These were all parts of the Ice Dragon King, but they weren't complete. They were only a very small portion. Zhou could clearly sense that there was a vague connection between the Ice Dragon King's terror items, but this connection was very weak and didn't affect him much. From the looks of it, there's still something missing? Zhou had a nagging feeling that the 8 items weren't complete. The completeness Zhou mentioned wasn't referring to the completeness of the Ice Dragon King's body, but that when these 8 items were placed together, it felt like something was missing. The Dharch said that it's very difficult for even terror-grade creatures to revive after death, but just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's impossible. I think there's something wrong with this item. Otherwise, it's impossible for the Knight the Arch to place them in different places. He could have kept them for himself. Zhou was guessing if Knight the Arch had another terror item that belonged to the Ice Dragon King. Perhaps it was the most important one. Ordinary creatures didn't dare touch terror items, much less carry them on them. However, Knight the Arch was naturally different. He was at the terror grade, so it shouldn't be a problem. However, Zhou didn't know where Knight the Arch was now. He didn't want to see him again, much less get the item in his hands. In the next few days, Hui Haifeng did some research. At the same time, he grasped Knight the Arch's information. This information and equipment made Hui Haifeng more confident in resolving Qinling's problem. He had already begun making preparations. He believed that it wouldn't take long for him to complete it. Zhou didn't know much about it. When he had nothing to do, he looked at the cube's ranking and realized that the top 10 had already been occupied by guardians. Furthermore, the number of guardians on the list had already reached 14. During this period of time, more and more guardians had been on the list. It looked like they wanted to use this ranking battle to defeat their opponents. First place was Stilia. Second place didn't change. It was still Great Sky Fiend that you had defeated. Third place was Fairy Burial. Following, there were some guardians that Zhou had never seen before. Their names looked very powerful. There was also a fellow named Metal Reaper. Zhou looked at his projection and realized that the guardian was like a metal robot. It looked like its combat strength was off the charts. For some reason, Starry Night, who had previously been ranked very high, fell to 10th place, barely staying in the top 10. Zhou searched for Starry Night online and realized that a guardian had previously challenged Starry Night. However, Starry Night didn't accept the challenge and his ranking automatically dropped. Later, there were a few consecutive challenges, but Starry Night didn't accept them. Soon, he fell to 10th place. The reason Zhou paid attention to Starry Night was that he felt that Starry Night might be Lu Yun. Therefore, he paid more attention, but it was only a guess. On the ranking, Zhou could already confirm that the guardians were Jiang Yan's Fairy Burial and Yusuji Nao's Great Sky Fiend. In addition, Zhou guessed that it was Zhong Zia and Starry Night was Lu Yun. If this was the case, among Wang Mingyuan's students, only he and Hui Haifeng weren't on the rankings. Hui Haifeng wanted to do research, so he definitely wouldn't participate in the battle. Zhou didn't have a strong desire to participate either. Previously, he wanted to participate in the battle because he wanted to go to the dimension to take a look at Wang Mingyuan's situation. However, now that he knew that Wang Mingyuan seemed to be doing well over there, Zhou lacked the motivation to participate in the battle. It didn't seem worth it to risk his life for a divine fruit. Furthermore, Zhou hadn't advanced to the mythical stage, so it was impossible for him to participate in the battle. Just as Zhou was studying the rankings, he saw the cube suddenly light up. It was a countdown. There was only 1 month left. On the cube screen, a shadow appeared. The shadow was distorted and blurry. It was impossible to see what it looked like, but it made one feel that it was a creature. Zhou had once entered the dimension and knew that the other party was indeed a creature. However, as the level of the dimensional world far exceeded Earth's, the vision of Earth creatures couldn't accurately capture the other party's physical characteristics. Therefore, it looked like a distorted shadow. In fact, it wasn't that the other party was distorted, but that the level of Earthling's vision wasn't high enough. Soon, the shadow said, in 720 hours, the person in first place on the rankings will become the owner of Earth and control its fate. Human with a guardian, show your strength to your heart's content. The winner is king, and the loser is a bandit. This is an eternal truth. I look forward to the birth of the king of Earth. Chapter 992. Many people disagreed with the figure's words. So what if he became first on the rankings? No matter how strong he was, it was impossible for him to control all humans. The various bigwigs wouldn't admit such a person as the Lord of Earth. You might think that this is ridiculous. Why is the first on the rankings the Lord of Earth? This is very simple. It's because the first on the rankings will obtain this dimensional wheel that represents the authority of the dimension. The person who controls it will obtain invincible power. The duration of the dimensional wheel will continue until the next year's ranking battle. Then, the next year's king of Earth and the owner of the dimensional wheel will be decided. As the figure spoke, a wheel of light appeared on the screen. As the light was too intense, it was like the sun. Ordinary people couldn't see what it was. Zhou took a careful look for a while and could only tell that it was a ball. He didn't know what it was for. Have the rules been changed? Zhou was puzzled as he sent the Dharch a message. The Dharch, I remember you once said that the various races agreed to hold a guardian battle every 100 years to determine the ownership of Earth. Why has it become a year now? The Dharch quickly replied, I'm a chess mountain. How would I know what happened in the dimension? However, I can guess that it might have something to do with your teacher, Wang Mingyuan. Why? Zhou didn't understand how the Dharch came to such a conclusion. Because those fellows from the dimension are also afraid, the Dharch said. Afraid? Are you saying that they are afraid of teacher? Zhou asked in puzzlement. Although Wang Mingyuan had become the king of the dragon gods, according to what Zhou knew, there were 8 such kings in the Octokind. Furthermore, above the Octokind were terrifying epigenic grade experts. It didn't seem right to say that they were afraid of Wang Mingyuan. Wang Mingyuan only absorbed and fused with a guardian in such a short period of time to break through to the calamity grade. Such an evolution speed is extremely terrifying in the dimension. You have to know that the time in the dimension isn't calculated like humans. Any life form's lifespan far exceeds that of humans by 100 or even 1,000 times, but their evolution speed will be much slower. Wang Mingyuan's evolution speed has frightened some dimensional races, so they want to speed up their exploration of Earth, the Dharch said. If they are really that afraid, why don't they just kill teacher? Zhou felt that the Thearch's analysis wasn't convincing. It's not like there's only one race in the dimension. The relationship between them is also very complicated. Although I didn't see it with my own eyes, I can imagine that your teacher is a very intelligent person. He grasped the balance of survival in the dimension. Although it might be very dangerous, he isn't dead yet, the Dharch said. That's just your guess, Zhou said after some thought. It doesn't matter if it's right or not. What's interesting is that some fellows have changed the rules. It already proves how impatient they are. The Dharch didn't argue with Zhou. What exactly is that dimensional wheel? Can one really be invincible with it? Zhou paid more attention to this question. I don't know. I've been trapped in Chess Mountain for too long. In our era, there was no such thing. However, since it was created by those fellows, I believe it should possess immense strength. I don't know if it can be invincible, but the strength of that thing is definitely not weaker than the Terrorgrade, the Dharch said after some thought. All the cubes in the world dimmed. The creature and the dimensional wheel that had spoken earlier disappeared. Zhou Wen's expression was somewhat solemn. This was because the appearance of the dimensional wheel had caused the situation on Earth to slide in an unpredictable direction. If it was really as they said, that possessing the dimensional wheel was equivalent to being invincible, what if the person who obtained the dimensional wheel was someone like Jing Daoxian or Ninth Arch? Just think about how invincible power without any restrictions would appear on Earth and be controlled by a crazy person. What would happen to Earth? Zhou Wen couldn't imagine it, nor did he dare think about it. At the same time, what made Zhou Wen feel depressed was the high and mighty attitude of the dimensional creatures. It was as though they treated Earth as a playground. Whoever won the game would receive their rewards. What was the difference between this and dogs fighting in a dogfighting ring and being rewarded with a meal of dog food by their owners? How can I break the influence of the dimension on humans? Zhou Wen constantly pondered over this question. Seizing the so-called dimensional wheel that gave him invincible power wasn't the real solution to the problem. Zhou Wen wasn't interested in being the king of the dogfighting ring. What he wanted was to destroy the dimensional creatures that thought they were high and mighty. It doesn't seem possible to defeat them at the moment. The physique of humans is too weak. Without the help of a guardian, it will be difficult for them to advance to the mythical stage. And mythical stage creatures are no different from cannon fodder in the dimension. Zhou Wen knew very well how big the gap was. However, no matter how big the gap was, he still wanted to continue because there was no way out unless he wanted to live his life in a muddle-headed manner. Can I think of a way to sever the connection between the dimension and Earth? Such a thought surfaced in Zhou Wen's mind, but he quickly rejected it. Perhaps there really was a way to sever the connection between the two, but after severing it, humans would no longer have the possibility of advancing further. They would only be trapped in this world and unable to make any progress. Once the passageway between the two was opened again, humans would face an even more difficult situation. Instead of waiting to be ravaged, it was better to resolve the problem now and make humans stronger. They were strong enough to fight dimensional creatures. Only then could they truly escape the fate of being enslaved. Ice Maiden once said that Earth might be the birthplace of the dimension. There are many things here that can be said to be extremely precious in the dimension. Perhaps this is the true opportunity for humans, Zhou Wen thought to himself. Are you interested in becoming the king of Earth? I can help you sign a contract with the strongest guardian. The Arch wanted to tempt Zhou Wen again. How powerful is it? Is it at the terror grade? Zhou Wen asked. Of course. The Arch gave an affirmative answer. A guardian that survived from ancient times? Zhou Wen immediately guessed something. This was because Zhou Wen had never seen any guardian born from the cocoon with the ability to transform into a terraform. Yes, in that era, the invincible guardian of the world. The Arch sent a message. Chapter 993. Which guardian is it? Zhou Wen asked. If you're willing, you will naturally know when the time comes, the Arch said. Forget it. I'm just an ordinary student. I'll let someone else be the king of Earth. Zhou Wen naturally wouldn't agree. Now he was just short of advancing to a perfect body. Perhaps the mythical stage was already right in front of him. How could he contract a guardian at such a time? Zhou Wen wouldn't even consider being the current #1 in the universe, much less the #1 in the world back then. Furthermore, Zhou Wen couldn't tell how true the Thearch's words were. In the Thearch's era, the invincible guardian shouldn't be from Chess Mountain, right? Zhou Wen still knew some history. Chess Mountain likely represented the Shang dynasty, but the Shang dynasty was eventually replaced by the Zhou dynasty. If that was also a guardian battle, then the strongest guardian should be the Zhou dynasty. Therefore, Zhou Wen felt that the Arch was probably bragging to deceive him. Hui Haifeng's research finally bore fruit. After injecting Qin Ling with new elements, the Dragon Man bloodline in Qin Ling's body turned from an unstable state to a stable state. Zhou Wen didn't know how he could distinguish between stable and unstable, But Hui Haifeng told them with certainty that Qin Ling's Dragonman bloodline couldn't be used to mutate other creatures in the future. This way, Qin Ling would be useless to the Ninth Arch. The Ninth Arch probably wouldn't cause trouble for him again. On the other hand, the dimensional creatures in the Seven Dragons Sea were a huge problem. If humans were injured by them, they would still be infected and mutate. This was something that couldn't be resolved. This was because all the creatures in the Seven Dragons Sea had been infected and mutated. There were so many dimensional creatures that it was impossible to kill them all. There were so many that it was unimaginable. Therefore, he could only hope that humans didn't court death. As long as they didn't enter the Seven Dragons Sea, they would be fine. Without the Seven Seas Dragon King's command, the dimensional creatures wouldn't rush out of the Seven Dragons Sea. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility of someone wanting to take the 1 in 1,000th chance. If the mutation really succeeded, they would obtain considerable strength. As for the Seven Seas Dragon King, Zhou got Primordial Spore to control it into the calabash and treat it as its residence. Primordial Spore still couldn't completely occupy its soul. The Seven Seas Dragon King would occasionally resist, but most of the time, Primordial Spore took the initiative. Sea Return City was almost done, and Ninth Arch didn't return again. Zhou planned on leaving Sea Return and heading north. After returning to Luoyang, he would head to the north to take a look. Firstly, because the ultimate family in the North District had expressed goodwill to Zhou, and secondly, Lance had always wanted to invite him. Furthermore, Sadie, Gully, and company were considered members of the Xianwen Club. They had a good relationship with Zhou and company, so they wanted to invite Zhou to the ultimate family clan as a guest. Sadie and Grid had originally come for Zhou and didn't plan on completing 4 years of studies at Sunset College. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before they returned. Now that they heard that Zhou was willing to go to the ultimate family clan, they planned on returning together. Now that the roads between the districts were getting more and more difficult to travel, they were afraid that if they returned any later, it wouldn't be so easy anymore. Yang said, Zhou, Dong, went to Hua. Now the Hui CC, the one, Hui, the C, the Yang he won. Hui Haifeng want to stay in Sea Return City to do research. So Li Xian and Feng Qiuyan followed Zhou, went to the North District. Zhou found it odd that Feng Qiuyan didn't stay in Sea Return City to accompany Qin Ling. Lil Yin Yin, aren't you afraid that Beauty Qin will be snatched away by others in Sea Return City? Li Xian was more gossipy than Zhou as he asked directly. Feng Qiuyan sighed and said, Actually, I don't know what to do. Don't tell me you despise her for having a dragon bloodline? Li Xian said with widened eyes. Is that what you think? It's just that I've always treated her as my sister in the past. I've never thought about that. I'm momentarily at a loss. Feng Qiuyan said in distress. You really don't know how fortunate you are. If I had such a beautiful fiancée, I would have long lost my virginity, Li Xian said. Don't talk so much, Zhou said to Feng Qiuyan. Then you have to think carefully. Otherwise, you'll regret it when the time comes. I know. I'll consider it carefully, Feng Qiuyan said seriously. After meeting up with Sadie and Gully, everyone set off for the North District. The changes along the way were indeed huge, but the ultimate family clan had long sent people over to bring Sadie and Gully back. Zhou followed them without any accidents. The North District had become even colder. There was ice and snow everywhere. The creatures that could survive here were of very high quality. Sadie and Gully told Zhou many dimensional zones in the North District, making him look forward to them. The group arrived at Frost City, where the ultimate family clan was. The city here was built from ice, making it look like a fairy tale world. Zhou originally imagined that Lance would come pick them up, but he didn't see him. Furthermore, when Zhou asked about Lance, the person who came to pick them up was evasive, as though he was hiding something. What happened to Lance? Gully was a straightforward person as he grabbed the person and asked. Helpless, the person had no choice but to tell Gully and company. Only then did everyone know that Lance was injured. The person who injured him was a young man from the Ultimate Family Clan, but he could only be considered a collateral relative. Lance had been injured in a fair duel. Impossible. How can that fellow, Joseph, be my brother's match? Even if my brother gave him a handicap, he wouldn't be his match. Gully immediately shouted when he heard the name of the person who had injured Lance. Gully, you've been away from Frost City for too long. There are some things you aren't aware of. Joseph has contracted a guardian and is now extremely powerful. He challenged Lance and defeated him. Among the younger generation, he's the strongest, the person said to Sadie. As the person spoke, he said to Sadie, Sadie, you have to be careful. He challenged Lance and even severely injured him. I'm afraid he will challenge you again. How dare he? Gully said angrily. Sadie gestured for Gully not to be angry. After some thought, she said, Joseph is also a member of the Ultimate Family Clan. I don't think he will go against me. Let's head back first. The few of them entered the city. After Zhou Wen and Li Xian settled down, they planned on taking a stroll around Frost City. Zhou Wen and company did as the Romans do. They each bought a fur coat and a fur hat. Or wore a white fox fur coat and looked charmingly naive. There's actually someone selling tyrant behemoth dolls here. As they were shopping, they entered a shop. Li Xian said in surprise when he saw a large tyrant behemoth doll. That's a figurine, not a doll. A 7- or 8-year-old boy corrected him seriously. Chapter 994. Isn't it the same? Li Xian said. Of course it's different. Figurines aren't toys for children, but works of art, the boy explained very seriously. I don't see anything different. It's just a doll. Li Xian looked left and right, but he couldn't tell what was different about the tyrant behemoth doll. It just looked more exquisite. The boy said angrily, No way. Don't spout nonsense if you don't understand. This is a great work of art. Li Xian looked inside the shop and curled his lips. If it's really a great work of art, why isn't there a single customer in the shop other than you? Let me see. Wow, such a small doll is actually selling for more than 100,000. It's no wonder no one buys it. After all, dolls are just dolls. They're so expensive. Which child would spend so much money to buy a doll? So much money is enough to buy a very good legendary companion egg. Li Xian was a little bored and wanted to tease the boy. The boy immediately said, That's not the case. Tyrant Behemoth and Tai Sui sold very well in the past, but what? Li Xian pressed. However, those people are too superficial. They think that Guardians are stronger than Tyrant Behemoth, so they're buying Guardian figurines, the boy said sadly. Is this shop yours? Zhou Wen looked at the companion beast models in the shop. Several top companion beast models from the previous ranking were sold, but most of them were Tyrant Behemoth and Tai Sui. The other companion beast models typically only had 2 or 3 types, but Tyrant Behemoth and Tai Sui models had all sorts of different versions. There was a huge difference in size and model. There were replicas, cartoonish versions, cute versions, and ferocious versions. There was a huge difference in size. The largest Tyrant Behemoth was on the shop's display stand. It was more than 4 meters tall and looked very similar to Tyrant Behemoth when it wasn't gigantified. It was a 1-to-1 replica. Zhou Wen really didn't know that Tyrant Behemoth and Tai Sui were so popular. Yes, the boy nodded. Since Guardian figurines are so easy to sell, why don't you sell them? Is there a problem with the supply? Zhou Wen asked curiously. The boy shook his head and said, The figurines are manufactured by our own factory. It's very easy to manufacture Guardian figurines, but I don't like them. I don't want to sell those Guardian figurines. Why? Has the Guardian bullied you? Li Xian asked with interest. I'm selling these companion beast figurines because they are partners that fight for humanity, but those Guardians aren't. I heard from Mom that those Guardians fight to enslave Earth and us humans. No matter how powerful they are, I won't sell their figurines, much less make them, the boy said seriously. When Zhou Wen and Li Xian heard that, they knew that the boy's background wasn't simple. For him to know such information, it was likely that his father wasn't ordinary. Everyone else is selling. If you don't sell, there won't be any business. Then, can this shop continue operating? Li Xian said. Anyway, the shop belongs to my family. At most, I won't sell it. It's no big deal. Furthermore, I believe that Tyrant Behemoth, Tai Sui, and company will definitely display their powerful strength on the rankings. When that happens, those superficial fellows will know that companion beasts aren't inferior to guardians at all. They will even be stronger, the boy said. This time, Li Xian didn't attack him, although he knew that the possibility of a companion beast appearing alone was very low. Unless it appeared with a guardian, it was possible for it to appear in the Battle of Guardians. However, seeing how stubborn and serious the boy was, even Li Xian couldn't bear to tell him the truth. A middle-aged man walked in and said to the boy, "Little E, it's time for us to return." However, when he saw Zhou Wen's appearance clearly, he said in surprise, "You are Zhou Wen?" When the boy heard the word Zhou Wen, he was first taken aback before widening his eyes. He looked at Zhou Wen in puzzlement and asked, "Your name is Zhou Wen too?" "My name is Zhou Wen." Zhou Wen nodded slightly. The middle-aged man said, "What do you mean his name is Zhou Wen?" "He's Tyrant Behemoth's owner, Zhou Wen." After the boy heard that, he asked in disbelief, "Are you really Tyrant Behemoth's owner?" "If there's no second Tyrant Behemoth, I think I should be," Zhou Wen said. You, are you really Tyrant Behemoth? Is it all right?" "No, that's not what I meant. It's great to be able to see you. My name is Li Benyi. I like you and your Tyrant Behemoth very much." The boy immediately became nervous as he spoke incoherently. "Do you want to see the real Tyrant Behemoth?" Zhou Wen asked with a smile. Can I? Li Benyi's excited voice trembled. "Of course." Zhou Wen looked at the space. The exhibition hall was very tall, and it was more than enough to accommodate Tyrant Behemoth. He summoned Tyrant Behemoth. Wow, it's really Tyrant Behemoth. It's too cool. It's much cooler than what I saw in the video. Our figurines aren't good enough. Li Benyi looked at Zhou Wen with a look of desire. "Can I touch it?" "Of course. If you are willing, I can let it take you around," Zhou Wen said. Yes. Of course I'm willing. Thank you so much." Li Benyi immediately jumped up in excitement. Zhou Wen got Tyrant Behemoth to reach out and lift Li Benyi up. He placed him on his shoulder and carried him around the shop. "It's really cool. When I grow up, I want to have such a companion beast." Li Benyi stroked Tyrant Behemoth's hair with a blissful expression. "I'm sorry to trouble you," the middle-aged man said to Zhou Wen. "It's nothing. It's rare for someone to like my companion beast so much." Zhou Wen looked at the symbol on the middle-aged man's clothes and asked, "Are you from the Ultimate Family Clan?" The middle-aged man nodded. "Yes, I was in charge of picking you up, but something happened on my side. I was temporarily replaced by someone else. I never expected us to be fated to meet here. My name is Li Benyu." Zhou Wen chatted with Li Benyu for a while before learning that he was considered a subsidiary of the Ultimate Family Clan. He didn't have the bloodline of the Ultimate Family Clan. He was only invited to join because of his talent in a certain aspect. Li Benyu was from the East District, but his wife was of pure Ultimate Family Clan bloodline. Li Benyu was of mixed blood. "Thank you. I fulfilled one of my 2 dreams. Now, all that's left is to see Tai Sui with my own eyes." When Tyrant Behemoth brought Li Benyi back, he still wore a look of longing. He held Tyrant Behemoth's finger, unwilling to let go. At the same time, he thanked Zhou Wen. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.